male leads, both the type with hormones turned up to the max. Mun Sinjian is a street mechanic, relying on his business face and a bit of cunning. He sweet-talks customers until they're dizzy. He'll also tamper with their cars so they have to come back next time with more money. That day, just like always, he was out on the street looking for a target. A burly man with spiky hair walked straight into his line of sight. Need some help? The big guy didn't refuse. Mun Sinjian immediately squatted down and started checking. The timing belts got issues, and the engine's not doing too well either. As he spoke, he unbuckled his own belt to use as a tool and cranked it open. Sometimes cars are like people. They suddenly drop everything. You a mechanic? Sort of. Not in a shop, on the street. That's kind of illegal, isn't it? What? You gonna call the cops? The spiky-haired Hulk looked him over from head to toe. I'm just curious why you work this hard. Obviously, there are easier ways to make money. Mun Sinjian lifted his eyes and gave the man a cold once-over. The car wasn't anything special, but the guy's clothes weren't cheap. He looked exactly like the kind of customer that's easy to fleece. All right, I'll milk him for a bit, he decided inwardly. So his hands grew steadier, and he made sure to leave a few little problems in the car. Nothing that'll show up in the short term. In a few days, he'll definitely have to come back to me. The calculations in his head were crystal clear. I'm not trying to play the victim. I've had nothing since I was a kid, so this is the only thing you can do. Are you satisfied now? It's not that this is the only thing you can do. There are tons of ways to both enjoy yourself and make money. Enjoy myself? Mun Sinjian frowned, his heart sinking. Bastard. What does he take me for? Your car is fixed. I usually charge $500, but I'll give you a discount today and only take $300. The guy with the spiky hair didn't even try to haggle. He just pulled out a wad of bills and casually tossed off a line. People ought to be a little greedy. Mun Sinjian had never expected him to be so straightforward. He froze for a moment, then hurriedly thanked him. He immediately handed over his own business card. He also said that if the car had any problems in the future, he'd come running whenever he was called. After ripping someone off for $300, he could finally swagger off to the bar. The bartender greeted him enthusiastically. He asked why he was being so generous today, so he told that pretty bartender all about the big fish he'd hooked. The conversation at the next table suddenly drifted into his ears. Word was that last night, a warehouse belonging to the Russian gang Rozu and one of the cartel's bases had both been cleaned out. It sounded like the work of a new group called Jobby. And rumor had it that anyone you picked at random from them would throw money around everywhere they went. Throwing money around everywhere they went. Wasn't that exactly how that guy today acted? Just then, his phone rang. The person on the other end was shaking with rage. What did you do to my car? This is how you repay people. This is a comic that will send your adrenaline through the roof. Both of the main characters are completely insane. He's a street-drifting auto mechanic, getting by with a bit of petty cleverness, barely scraping by. That day he ran into a blonde guy with a buzz cut. Today he ran into a blonde guy with a buzz cut. As soon as the buzz cut guy made a move, he tossed him $300. He thought he had hooked a big spending sucker. He never expected that he'd be caught this fast. Following the voice on the phone, Jack almost effortlessly zeroed in on his exact spot in the bar. Looks like with this car repair skill of yours, you finally don't have to be a vagrant anymore. Jack sat down beside him and raised his hand for the bartender to bring a double whiskey. Mun Sinjian was still defending himself, saying he had already tried his best to fix it. But clearly, Jack hadn't come here for that matter at all. These clumsy little tricks of yours, and you really think you're clever. I just want to serve my customers more thoroughly. The relationship between us might be more than just mechanic and customer. Do you want to spend a night with me? Jack put serving the customer in blunt and straightforward terms. Mun Sinjian lightly tapped Jack's palm with his glass. So long as you're willing to be my customer. And so the two of them walked out of the bar. And so the three of them walked out of the bar and started making out right there in the parking lot. Looks like your life as a mechanic isn't as easy as it sounds either. In order to survive, you can even do this kind of thing. You should let yourself enjoy it once in a while too. Shouldn't you? In the next second, Mun Sinjian suddenly reversed the roles and pinned Jack beneath him. But as his gaze shifted to the side, he suddenly caught sight of the inside of the car. That was the car he had worked on. The inside actually had a handgun and a bloodstained shirt. A line from the bar just now instantly flashed through his mind. That guy from the charity group who was throwing money around. Could he be with the Mafia? Mr. Mun Sinjian. Jack suddenly called out his name with precision. Fuck, he even figured out his name. Only in that moment did he realize that the one who had been hooked was actually himself. He immediately raised both hands. I didn't see anything. I don't want to know anything. I'll get lost right now. But Jack wasn't buying it at all. He directly grabbed Mun Xinjian by the neck and slammed him hard against the hood. What? The deal between mechanic and customer fell through. The deal is already over. So ridiculous. You're the one who brought it up, but I'm the one who gets the final say. You think you can play when you want and dump when you want? No way. Mun Xinjian tried to break free, but Jack had no intention of letting go. Since you tampered with the car, you should have disappeared earlier. Then why did you still call me? Didn't you just take me for a patsy, think I'm dumb and rich, and that you could squeeze another big score out of me? Dump me when you want? No way. Jack roughly pinned Mun Xinjian beneath him, forcing him to provide after-sales service. In the face of absolute strength, Mun Xinjian could only bow his head for now. He was unwilling inside, yet was still forced to cooperate. He had swindled $10,000 out of him. Now he wanted him to repay it with his body. Mun Xinjian had even thought he'd hooked a prime sucker. In the end, the one who got hooked was himself. Facing the force Jack pressed down on him with, he could only submit, but his eyes kept betraying his resentment and rage. Jack held his head down and humiliated him again and again. Finally, Jack completely lost control. What you did, messing with my car, we'll call it even now. When Xinjian stared at Jack and said, I have principles. I don't serve just anyone. Jack shook his head. A lot of people do bad things and then look for excuses for themselves. That's how they can feel a bit better. Anyway, the deal ends here. Our money and goods are settled. We have nothing more to do with each other. Don't contact me again. Jack picked up the bloodstained shirt and casually wiped himself with it. Then he shot Wen Xinjian a gaze that was both cold and vicious. A deal is a deal. Next time we meet? No, there won't be a next time. If anything on your side breaks down in the future, I'll come to you. He even called him by his name in a mockingly intimate tone. Then Xinjian immediately stepped on the gas and sped off. Hey, what on earth are you trying to do? When Xinjian clenched his fists in anger, he took it out on the car parked by the roadside. Truly despicable. Back home, seeing that stack of money on the table, he forced himself to calm down again. Does it matter how the money came? What matters is that it makes money, doesn't it? The next day, he went to see an acquaintance. From their chat, he learned that a newly emerged group called Jobby seemed to have a police background. Although it hadn't been around for long, it was already throwing its weight around in this port. When Xinjian asked the other party to help look into a man with a golden buzz cut, but he still didn't know the man's name, and that made things a bit troublesome, because in this neighborhood, a guy with a golden buzz cut can casually pull out a whole truckload. This time he tried both soft and hard tactics before the other party reluctantly agreed to help him ask around. After leaving his acquaintance's place, when Xinjian received a call from an unknown number, even though the number wasn't saved, when Xinjian still guessed in a second, it was Jack. Don't pretend you don't know me. I don't have time to play with you right now. Follow National Highway 27 and come to the Southern Industrial Park. Stop! Jack's commanding tone made the already annoyed Wen Xinjian even more furious. But before he could blow up, Jack added, From where you are now, there's a black car 2 blocks away. When Xinjian reflexively turned his head, no way. You're actually surveilling me? I'm a repairman, not a driver. Aren't they both in the service industry? What's the difference? The money's negotiable. Get the timing right and come over. Don't be late. The next second he hung up, not even giving Wen Xinjian a chance to say a single word back. This is a gangster comic that sends your adrenaline soaring, with a suffocatingly tight pace, no wasted lines, and hormones practically overflowing. Just because of that $10,000 from Jack. When Xinjian could only grit his teeth and follow his instructions, driving the car Jack arranged, showing up at the designated spot down to the very second. His mouth was still saying, cash and goods settled, no ties between us. Yet he still asked, are we going in? But his body was more honest. He still followed Jack's orders and drove into an abandoned warehouse. Seeing the setup, when Xinjian's heart instantly sank. Not good, but he still drove the car inside. Turns out Jack was here to make a deal. You've changed your taste? That guy isn't even qualified to be your companion. He handled the task I assigned very well, and I am very satisfied. Jack raised his hand and directly opened the trunk. That car was the one Wen Xinjian had just driven over. In the trunk, 2 big bags of packages were just laid out in front of everyone. From a distance, Wen Xinjian took one look and understood. This was no small amount. So this guy was treating me like a porter. Bastard. He was gritting his teeth thinking that, when suddenly, a hunchbacked man came over to strike up a conversation. How long have you been following Jack? He's not the type who casually brings people along. You even went upstairs with him. What? Did you earn his trust by going upstairs with him? When Xinjian shot back in an icy voice. The next second, the other man started hurling insults at Wen Xinjian. his mouth getting filthier and filthier. Right after that, he pulled out his piece and pressed it right against Xinjian's chin. Here we go again, this kind of person. And Jack saw this whole scene clearly. He immediately stepped forward and directly snatched the man's gun away. In just a couple of moves, he knocked the hunchback guy flat on the ground. Lowering his voice, he warned, "If I ever see anyone pointing a gun at me again, I'll send your whole family, one by one, to meet the king of hell." At this moment, the guy doing the deal with Jack hurried out to smooth things over. Jack didn't want to waste time either. Jack didn't want to delay any longer. He gave Wen Xinjian a look, telling him to move the packages into another car. In the end, he again told that man to clean up the scene properly. In the end, that man was urged by him to clean it up. On the way back, Jack directly said that just now, when someone pointed a gun at Wen Xinjian, he didn't even blink. Wen Xinjian said that after drifting on the streets for so many years, he had seen plenty of people like this. Jack told Wen Xinjian that from the first moment he saw him, he knew Wen wasn't any decent guy either. However, Wen Xinjian refuted him. "You've got it wrong. I would never do something this dangerous. This is much simpler than what you did in the parking lot. If you like that kind of thing more, how about we do it again right now?" Jack spoke with a hidden meaning. When Xinjian was furious, how could these two things be the same? Now that he had exposed himself in front of dangerous people, it was inevitable that they would cling to him in the future. "So what? You've got no choice now. This is also part of our deal," Jack said smugly. When Xinjian was so angry his whole body tensed up. He suddenly stomped hard on the accelerator. The next second, he hit the brakes sharply again. He pulled the car over to the side of the road for the moment. "You took my money, so you have to listen to me. There will only be more things like this from now on." When Xinjian swallowed his anger, but in this matter, it seemed he couldn't gain the upper hand no matter what. However, he soon realized something was off. "Damn, you must be very satisfied with my after-sales service. Do you want to do it with me one more time? Look closely. This is a gangster comic with adrenaline maxed out. The pace is tight, with zero wasted words. The hormones are practically bursting out of the screen." When Xinjian was dragged down by Jack and pulled into a gang transaction. From that moment on, he was never clean again. Once you've taken something from someone else, it's hard to keep your backbone stiff. In this deal with Jack, he seemed unable to find a single advantage. But there was one thing he was very sure of. It was Jack who took a liking to him first. "What, you want to go another round here? I'm giving you the initiative. Like I said last time, I don't have the right to choose anymore. But the initiative is still in my hands." "Sure, that's fine," Jack agreed without hesitation. Then the two of them just started right there in the car, no shyness at all. There was one thing they really synced on, they both liked it rough. When Xinjian said that from now on he was going to do whatever he wanted in Jack's car anyway, since it was all handed over to him, Jack only replied with one word, "Okay." Then they got into an endless argument over who actually took a liking to whom first. Dear readers, who do you think fell for the other first? Leave a word in the comments. When Xinjian said bluntly, "You were the one who took a liking to me first. That's why you used the deal as an excuse to pull all these little moves. So what exactly is it you want to get from me? Special services, of course that counts as one thing, and maybe some other benefits too." After they made it official, Jack demanded that when Xinjian stopped being a street thug, he would arrange a legitimate job for Wen Xinjian. "Take it off. Save it for when we're back home." When he got home, when Xinjian glanced at that sum of money that hadn't been touched at all, then his whole body collapsed into the chair. Just now Jack had made it very clear. He wanted him to keep his lower half under control. He admitted that when he first approached Jack, it really was for the money. But now he'd finally realized the other man was far from simple, and he was starting to get scared. Who exactly is he? What is he really doing? Life hadn't exactly been well off before, but at least it had been much safer than what happened tonight. Yet now, he just had to get himself involved with someone this dangerous. If he didn't do as he was told, would Jack kill him, or simply force him to take the drugs? Before I find out this guy's real identity, am I just at his mercy? For several days in a row, Jack didn't come looking for Moon Sunjae again, until one day someone came straight to his door. "You're Moon Sunjae, right? Once this job is done, you're coming with me." Moon Sunjae instantly tensed up and warily asked who he was. The man only replied, "I'm here to pick you up. Do you want a good husband who dotes on his wife? If I'm going to date you, I'll fix your job problem first." This is a high-tension gangster comic. A big bearded man found Moon Sunjae. "Didn't Jack tell you? Jack, the blonde guy with the buzz cut. Jack said you're working." So that man was called Jack. Moon Sunjae immediately dialed Jack's number, wanting to confirm it with him in person. But when he called, the number turned out to be invalid. Moon Sunjae stared at the man in front of him, tall and burly, He suspected this guy was also a member of that jobby organization. The fact that the other side could so easily know his name and even know which street he scraped by on, just thinking about it sent a chill down his spine. There was nothing he could do. He could only follow the bearded man into the truck. On the way, his mind was a mess. This truck could probably hold 800 pounds of drugs. They weren't going to dump him in some abandoned factory again, were they? But the bearded man brought him to an auto repair shop instead. This place is? Moon Sunjae frowned. He'd been here before. The bearded man told him to wait a moment and went into the room first to call someone. When Shinjian, however, took the opportunity to stroll around. The interior decoration had changed, but almost everything else was the same. Many years ago, he worked at an electronics factory. He was young and ignorant then, and even had a boyfriend, but the other man's behavior became more and more perverted. He really couldn't stand it and proposed a breakup, but the other party turned around and bit back, completely destroying his reputation. With no other choice, when Shinjian could only leave the electronics factory. Later, he came to this repair shop to apply for a job, but he never expected that after reading his resume, the other party also knew about what happened at the electronics factory and rejected him on the spot. He hadn't expected that many years later, he would actually return here. Swaying slightly, the boss casually asked when Shinjian a few questions, rocking back and forth. But what weighed more on when Shinjian's mind was something else. How did the boss know some of his situation? The boss said it was the resume Jack sent over. That bastard's background check was way too thorough. In the end, when Shinjian still asked, "This is a legal repair shop, right?" "Of course. We are a repair shop that embraces love. All right, you win." The boss then briefly showed him around the work environment. He also let him meet his new colleagues. Only then did when Shinjian learn that the bearded man who brought him here was not a gang member at all, but also a mechanic here. Everyone said that to welcome the new colleague, they should go have a drink. From their conversation, he learned that when Shinjian had been illegally adopted by a couple since childhood. Besides him, there were 5 other children, and that couple adopted them only to collect government relief funds. So when Shinjian's childhood had been very miserable, and Jack was just a regular at this repair shop, and casually introduced when Shinjian over. Everyone's impression of Jack was rich, arrogant, but a guy who didn't look like he had any future. Unknowingly, the drunkenness surged up in when Shinjian, and his vision started to blur. And at some point, the others had disappeared as well. Jack suddenly appeared in front of him. "Looks like you're in a pretty good mood. Friction generates heat. Everyone understands that principle." But to be able to push Shinjian to the verge of collapse on the very first time, it was probably only Jack who could do that. In his ears were low, suppressed gasps. In his hand, it felt like he was clutching endless desire. He was just a street mechanic. Yet Heepanpan ended up being targeted by a man whose entire being radiated a forceful aura. The two of them made a deal. Jack arranged for when Shinjian to be placed in a repair shop. To welcome him aboard, his co-workers all went to a bar to drink together. When Shinjian drank until he was a bit drunk, in a daze, he saw Jack sit down across from him. "Where did the repair guys go? They saw me coming, so they left. Looks like everyone's pretty sober. Huh. Why did you put me into the repair shop so you can make money off me legally? And that way you can illegally run a background check on me. If you're gonna sleep with someone, you need to get to know them first, right? I need someone I can trust. So does that make us partners? Partners? The relationship between you and me is not an equal one. A more accurate term would probably be bed partner. That really is quite an impressive relationship. But unfortunately, I'm in a bad mood today, and I don't feel like serving you. What an impudent guy. You think playing me is a lot of fun. Huh? Mun Sinjian staggered over to Jack and knelt down in front of him. "This time, it's your turn to serve me." The two of them were pressed close together, walking all the way into the alley beside the tavern. Jack really started to serve Mun Sinjian just as he wanted. Out on the street, the hunchback who had humiliated Mun Sinjian last time but ended up getting beaten badly by Jack, was wandering the streets with another punk, looking for someone. "That guy called ya, that buzzcut who suddenly showed up. I'm gonna pay him back 100-fold. I heard he's always dragging along a tail lately, wandering around a lot." The two of them circled around to the mouth of an alley. Suddenly, from a distance, they recognized Mun Sinjian. "Isn't that one of Jack's little lackeys?" At this moment, Mun Sinjian also saw them. Because Jack had his back to the hunchback hadn't noticed Jack was there too. Thinking Mun Sinjian was easy to bully, the hunchback braced himself to rush up and hit him, cursing nonstop as he went. He cursed and sneered at the same time. "Heh, that didn't take long. And Jack's already ditched you?" Mun Sinjian directly called out Jack's name. The hunchback froze on the spot. Jack only turned his head slightly, and that sharp gaze of his, like a cold blade, stabbed straight into the hunchback's eyes. The hunchback was so scared he was stunned, not daring to take even a single step forward, but he still tried to act tough, muttering, "We'll see." Mun Xinjian lifted his head in a smug smile. So just a single face is enough to scare people off. He lowered his head again, pressed close to Jack, and whispered softly, "What happened between you and me tonight will probably spread through your organization. You made me call your name on purpose just for this, didn't you?" Jack did not get angry at this little scheme of Wen Xinjian's. On the contrary, he said, "In the future, when you run into something you can't avoid, just use him to your heart's content like you did today. Is that an order too? This is the authority I'm giving you." His hand was both pale and rough, his palm full of calluses. "And we are nothing more than a relationship of mutual exploitation." The low voice pressed against my ear, echoing again and again. The fingers that had me bound were rough, direct, and feral. "It's the first time I've met someone who could make me pass out. Next time, I want to see you on your clean bed." Jack repeated his demand. "As long as you heard it clearly, then just keep your lower half under control. Because he has a cleanliness obsession. He will only accept meeting again on a clean bed." After that thrilling entanglement in the back alley of the bar ended, Jack headed to a warehouse and met another operative of the jobby organization Boniel. "I'd say we'll be able to hook a big shot soon. He's willing to pay several $1,000,000 for the crystal. Of course, it could also be fake news another gang deliberately put out to test us. According to your plan, our gang can be considered to have found its footing now. Thanks to you, Jack," he said, then raised his hand to point to the other side. "In that last deal of yours, this guy embezzled a huge sum and even messed everything up." Jack slowly walked toward him. "Looks like you really have a death wish." Seeing that, the man immediately begged Jack for mercy. Jack leaned in close to his ear and asked in a low voice, "You're the one who ordered your men to follow me, aren't you?" "And no, it wasn't me. It must have been some other officer who gave the order. You and I have no personal grudge, but you really did steal something. If you can't pay the money back, then you pay it back with yourself." As soon as he finished speaking, a huge truck suddenly charged into the warehouse. It drove straight toward the person hanging there. Boniel stared at the stain on Jack's clothes and teased with a smile, "Aren't you the one who loves cleanliness the most?" Then she twisted the knife. "Someone who loves cleanliness this much, and your clothes still got this dirty. Looks like you really enjoyed yourself just now." Jack's mind buzzed, and the scene from earlier flashed back frame by frame. When Xinjian had always been unhappy about Jack secretly investigating him behind his back. "If you want to investigate, fine, but don't do it behind my back and still let me notice it. And don't keep testing me again and again." A few days later, the co-workers at the repair shop brought up that night of drinking again. In the end, it was Jack who came, and that fierce look in his eyes was like saying, "Get lost." So we really left. But the fact that they didn't have to pay for the drinks still made them quite happy. Because today the repair shop owner was especially busy. Several big clients came by. One of the big clients wanted to modify a new car, saying it would be used to hide drugs. The boss originally wanted to refuse, but the other party directly slapped down a wad of cash, and he immediately agreed with a beaming smile, the corners of his mouth stretching so wide they couldn't close. Jack, for once, showed up at the repair shop carrying little cakes. All the co-workers tacitly understood. Jack and Shin had an unusual relationship. The repair shop owner was also very satisfied with Shin's work. He casually asked Jack, "How did you two meet?" Jack's gaze stayed on Wen Xinjian the whole time and never moved away. "Business relationship, haha." The boss raised an eyebrow. "Did you two rehearse your story?" Shin said the same thing. Last time Jack had said that the next time they met, it had to be in bed. So now, the moment when Xinjian sees Jack, that's the only sentence left in his head. Jack circles around Wen Xinjian, his whole being switching straight into flirting mode. He keeps saying this and that, all kinds of useless nonsense. Just then, a mysterious customer comes into the repair shop, the owner of a well-known casino. He wants to order a modified car, and he specifically asks for the top, fiercest, most perfect kind. As soon as I turn around, I hear the guys lowering their voices. "I heard he's a pervert, but for the sake of money, I'll put up with it for now." He leaned close to my ear and lowered his voice. "Come with me." The two of us walked outside together. "I can't even be bothered to count anymore. It's all your cars. You even had him buy a few more cars he likes." Jack let out a quiet chuckle. "I'm afraid what gets wrecked this time won't be the cars. It'll be me." When Xinjian told Jack about the person who had just come into the shop, said he wanted to modify a car and even hide drugs inside, he suspected it had something to do with the organization Jack belonged to. Real couriers wouldn't do it this way. Only in a gang war would someone pull something like this. Do the people at the repair shop know what you do? In their eyes, I'm probably just some rich, thuggish businessman. He looked over at Wen Xinjian again. And you? What do you think I am? Wen Xinjian fell silent for a moment. He figured that even if he asked, Jack wouldn't tell the truth. Just then, Jack suddenly grabbed Wen Xinjian by the arm. The distance between them shrank in an instant, and the atmosphere turned ambiguous with it. Jack said in a low voice, "You've been digging into me behind my back." Wen Xinjian admitted it outright and even said he would get to the bottom of it in his own way. He wouldn't stab him in the back, but he did plan to leave some marks on Jack. Not only did Jack not object, he even told him to investigate all he wanted. A second later, he started getting handsy with Wen Xinjian again. "Looks like you didn't come here to get your car fixed. You came to cling to me, and I'm here to keep an eye on you." Jack brushed a kiss against his earlobe. "Compared to drug dealing, you're much better suited to fixing cars." He followed the motion and tried to kiss him, but Wen Xinjian flung him off in one sharp move. Wen Xinjian raised his hand and flipped him the middle finger. In Jack's phone, there was actually a photo of someone called Harry Whaledew. It seemed that his appearance today was not a coincidence at all. Right then, a call came in from an unknown number. The person on the other end directly told Jack, "The new branch of the Kurown Hotel is about to open." They even casually added a line, "There is an even bigger boss behind Whaledew." Jack's heart sank. The big deal Boniel mentioned probably had to start with this person. The big deal starts with this person. And the other party twisted the knife further. This Whaledew is a black-haired pervert. He also urged Jack to do a good job. Only if he did it beautifully would the people above notice him. So this Whaledew who showed up today, is it really him? He's not the kind of man who stuns you with good looks at first sight, but that "I control everything" overbearing CEO aura was nailed down perfectly. Every single move was as cold as a warning. "Don't come closer, don't test me." Yet he doesn't rely on brute force to pressure people. Toward someone he's taken a liking to, he will, in his own way, give them everything they want, even if the other person hasn't spoken a single word out loud. Jack and the other operatives in the organization were handling a shipment at the docks. Jack wasn't familiar with them. Just from a few lines of conversation he gathered that these people were probably in league with the small fry who had tailed him a few days ago. At that moment, Jack's phone buzzed. He had received an anonymous text message. It was obvious that some hostile force was trying to disgust him and take revenge on him. "Where's that little lackey of yours? Bring him along to the next deal and let me have a look." Jack's eyes darkened, like a flash of a blade. In the next second, he slapped this text message straight onto the heads of the two people in front of him. "You're all already stepping on my head, and you still pretend you don't know what that guy looks like? What do you mean by that?" Jack couldn't be bothered to listen to their excuses any longer. He drew a handgun from his body. He raised his hand and fired a shot, killing one of them on the spot. "I heard you people want to kill me." He turned the muzzle and pointed it at the other one. "You make money for us? Why would we want to kill you?" That man's voice was shaking as he desperately begged for mercy. But Jack didn't want to hear another word. "The rest you can go explain to the traitor." With that, he pulled the trigger again. After dealing with those two people, he turned around and spoke to the remaining underlings. "From now on, this area is under your control. You've been promoted. Do you still remember how Wen Xinjian once asked a friend to investigate Jack? Now that person finally had news. He had hired hackers and dug up information on more than a dozen blonde crewcut guys in the Jobby organization. Yet in all that information, Jack was nowhere to be found. The friend said the hackers he hired were the kind who can hack anything as long as there's a way in. And still, if even they couldn't find anything, it could only mean Jack was not simple. When Xinjian told his friend that he had been assigned to the repair shop, he had originally thought it would be a repair shop tied to the mob, but so far it looked very normal. His friend was happy for him, because this was exactly the stable life Wen Xinjian had always wanted, although he occasionally ran into things like people asking to install a hidden compartment in their cars. Overall, though, it was much safer than doing repairs on the street like before. Today was payday. When Xinjian walked up to a machine to withdraw money, these step-by-step, orderly days made him feel very grounded. At this moment, a strange man suddenly called out to him. Smiling, he asked, "You're Wen Xinjian, right? Could I trouble you to help me fix my car?" He also said that Jack had sent him to find him. When Xinjian thought Jack had called him over to fix a car for the organization, and he didn't have time to react. The other man gave him a gentle push and whispered, "My car is just nearby." Just like that, when Xinjian followed the man into a secluded dark alley, then that person appeared before his eyes again, the hunchback. "You've got it wrong." The male lead of this comic was never the kind of size difference type who only knows how to cry. The hunchback spoke bluntly to Wen Xinjian. Jack had thrown their gang into utter chaos, so they decided, to make Wen Xinjian their target. Because Wen Xinjian was someone Jack protected. Jack had even killed one of their organization's officers. Even that iron bar was disguised by him as an accident. There was no way they could swallow this humiliation. But Wen Xinjian was not someone who would just stand there and be bullied. The next second he swung his fist and fought back. Looks like you, this mechanic, don't just fix cars by the roadside. You're actually fighting every day. The other man pulled out a handgun, and Wen Xinjian smoothly snatched the gun from the man's waist. Don't move recklessly. What? You actually know how to use a gun? A gun is about the same as an electric drill. You just pull the trigger, and it works, doesn't it? Thinking, I should have broken this brat's fingers long ago. But first let me see. Since Jack protects you so tightly, just how valuable are you really? At that moment, the big man behind Wen Xinjian took advantage of his distraction and knocked him down with a punch from behind. Damn it, that's really low. The hunchback used zip ties to bind Wen Xinjian's hands behind his back, was brought over a bucket of cold water and dumped it on him to wake him up. What exactly do you want? The hunchback slowly put on his gloves. Of course, we're here to have a taste of you. Wen Xinjian, however, wasn't afraid at all. Of course, we're here to have a taste of you. Wen Xinjian remained calm as well. Come on, try it. Let's see how bold you really are. I'll make you understand, bit by bit, what that feels like. When the hunchback straddled Wen Xinjian suddenly thrust his body upward, slamming back into him. The hunchback gasped in pain and flew into a rage. He raised his hand and gave Wen Xinjian a vicious slap. Then he started harboring perverse ideas toward Wen Xinjian. We're going to pin the blame for stealing the drugs entirely on you, and then we'll let Jack see with his own eyes that you betrayed him. So, how about it? This plan is ruthless enough, right? Wen Xinjian tried hard to tear open the zip tie, but no matter how he struggled, it was useless. Jack didn't ask me to deliver the goods. He told the hunchback to do it. This was clearly completely different from what the hunchback had in mind. Then what does that make you? I don't know what that makes me either, but he really does fancy me. As soon as Wen Xinjian said this, it actually drove a wedge between the two kidnappers, because Jack had never told Wen Xinjian to run the drugs. So the plan, they just had to dump everything on Wen Xinjian, fell apart immediately. Then how are we supposed to explain this to Jack? The hunchback vented all his anger on Wen Xinjian. He landed several more heavy slaps on him. Wen Xinjian just stared at him coldly. Where do you get the confidence to be this arrogant? Do you have someone backing you up? Hunchback's words made Wen Xinjian remember what Jack said that day. You can make full use of me. Hey! Hunchback couldn't stand his provocation, so he told Wen Xinjian, while you were unconscious, we fed you some drugs, and the effects are about to kick in. When the time comes, you'll feel so good you'll go crazy. Wen Xinjian finally snapped the zip ties completely. The kidnappers immediately rushed up together to pin him down. Just then, a tall figure walked in. It was Jack. Didn't I say, don't point guns at my people? This comic is both sexy and extreme. Hunchback grabbed Wen Xinjian, wanting to use him to threaten Jack, but Jack had already tracked down their warehouse. As soon as Jack stepped through the door, Hunchback's legs went weak with fear on the spot. Jack couldn't be bothered to waste words on them. He raised his hand and fired a shot, blowing away one of them on the spot. The bullet whizzed past right over Wen Xinjian's head. Right after that, another shot went off, blasting through Hunchback's leg. For something like this that doesn't even know its own weight and bites wildly at everyone, it should be bitten back exactly as it bit. Jack tilted his head and said to Wen Xinjian, you deal with him. But Wen Xinjian froze at once. He had never seen anything like this before. In his heart, he still resisted it, and he didn't dare move his hands. Fine. Jack's voice grew even colder. Since you can't bring yourself to do it, I'll do it myself. Jack pressed the muzzle of the gun directly against Hunchback's crotch. Hunchback broke down on the spot, crying and begging for mercy, saying he had never meant to hurt him. He just wanted to scare him a little. But Jack didn't listen at all, and coldly countered, wasn't it you going around saying that I already had someone? It's also thanks to you, Jack lifted his eyes, that I was able to wipe out your entire organization in one go. The next second, there was another gunshot, blowing his head off on the spot. When your own weakness is seized by the enemy, you have to turn it around, dig into the deepest part of the other person's heart, and utterly destroy him. But right at this moment, Wen Xinjian also realized something was wrong with his own body. He actually watched Jack's bloody actions and instead started to get excited. Even worse, his heart wouldn't stop pounding as long as he looked at Jack. Jack used some clothing to cover the corpse's face. Then he walked step by step over to Wen Xinjian's side. He squatted down, saw that Wen Xinjian was indeed not right, and asked in a low voice, what did you take? Wen Xinjian couldn't explain it either. He only remembered that they had forced some medicine down his throat. Jack suddenly shoved him down and stared into his eyes. Your pupils are dilated. Doesn't seem like an aphrodisiac. Jack's tone sank. It's more like a stimulant. You'll become extremely sensitive very soon. He lowered his voice. Let me help you. But when Xinjian was still panicking, what if the police came? Jack pinned him down, his voice frighteningly steady. Focus. The police won't come, and no one else will come either. Jack leaned close. Here, there are only the two of us. Then Jack helped Wen Xinjian until he released protein. The focus of this part is not that surface-level meaning. It's that Jack was really using a focus your sensations method to steady him. At the temporary location, he hurriedly gave Wen Xinjian treatment. Otherwise, Wen Xinjian would very likely be left with permanent impotence. But even so, he was clearly already sober. He still felt it wasn't enough. His mind completely blank. His desire still burning. He was burning with anxiety, only wanting to continue with Jack in the car. Do it on your bed? But Jack instead suggested going to his place. Jack used sensory-focused therapy to help Wen Xinjian release that overload of protein. This also, in a way, indirectly revealed Jack's identity. Jack was absurdly familiar with Wen Xinjian's home address. Regarding this matter, Wen Xinjian could only say, he felt very helpless. Jack did know the address, but this really was also his first time coming in. Didn't I say that I wouldn't call the police to arrest you? Then why are you still monitoring me? Just think of it as me guarding against an unknown threat. Do you think I would kill you? Several images flashed quickly through Wen Xinjian's mind. Are you afraid of me? That scene of the gun pressed against his temple surfaced once again. He couldn't tell whether this counted as fear or not. But the only thing he was sure of now was that his throat was dry and sore, so that he could happily curse Jack out in the future. When Xinjian asked for his real name, Jake Gillian. Jake Gillian, this bed is very clean. I'm going to dig into the deepest part of your heart as well. What followed was an intense bout of lovemaking. If you run into something like this in the future, you can endure it. If you run into something like this in the future, don't dodge it again. When Xinjian noticed that Jack's body was burning hot. When Xinjian confirmed it once more, Jack's body really was burning hot, even though he had no tattoos. But as he felt further down, he still touched the scar from the bullet hole. This was Jack, and Wen Xinjian's first time in the true sense. At the same time, it was also Jack's first time. According to netizens' research, Jack's doesn't really count as a first time, just that he hasn't done it many times. But his movements were not clumsy at all. The two of them that round went straight to the point, right to the point. Their coordination was excessively in sync. The next day, when Wen Xinjian woke up, he found that Jack had long since disappeared. Only money and a gun were left on the table. Jack was indeed a demon, but compared to other demons, he was already very restrained. After going through this, Wen Xinjian truly understood that he could never go back to those days of fixing cars on the street. And now, as if treading on thin ice, he had to be even more careful. One wrong step and he would fall straight through. Coming out of the convenience store, he happened to see an auntie's car had broken down. At first, for the first time in a long while, he simply wanted to go over and lend a hand. Something was jamming the trunk lock. He helped the aunt solve the trouble, but just then, a young man suddenly rushed over. But at that moment, that young guy suddenly rushed over, grabbed Wen Xinjian by the collar. I finally found you, you bastard. You're the one who deliberately broke my car last time. Do you have any evidence? Traitor, then go tell the police. Go on, let's go to the police station and talk. Touching another man's wife, you have to pay the price. As a result, Wen Xinjian sprayed out a mouthful of salty soda on the spot. But when Wen Xinjian was fixing cars on the street, he really had racked up quite a lot of debts. He was recognized by someone and was directly twisted by the arm and taken to the police station. After being taken to the police station, facing the police interrogation, even if he truly wanted to help that aunt, in the eyes of the police, this is you trying to cheat the other person out of money. Because among the people who come here, 8 or 9 out of 10 say the same thing. When Xinjian was also very helpless, it was rare for him to show some kindness and want to help someone. And in the end, it still turned out like this. Do too many bad things, and even if you want to do good now, no one believes you. The police checked his fingerprints and went, well now, this guy looks pretty decent, but it turned out he had been brought in so many times before. Who knows whether you've done other things as well. When Xinjian kept wiping his sweat and worrying, if they really dug everything up, he'd be finished. At this moment, a police officer walked in. The two of them leaned close together, whispering something. He thought of how he had followed Jack to transport drugs once. Then he remembered how Jack had even killed someone in the warehouse that day. Those things alone were enough to keep him in prison for years. He caught a glimpse of the gun at the policeman's waist. But just then, the officer opposite him spoke, "All right, you can go." When Xinjian walked out completely dazed, he didn't really have anyone around him who could say anything on his behalf to the police. Could it be again? Sure enough, Jack was standing across from him, waiting. When Xinjian let out a laugh, of course. Who else could it be but this guy? Jack's oppressive aura made when Xinjian involuntarily sigh in admiration. He just stood there as if everyone in the police station ought to come out and greet him. The two of them, one in front and one behind, walked to the street-side fast food cart. One in front and one behind, they walked to the street-side fast food cart. They bought 2 hot dogs. When Xinjian asked Jack, "Since your organization, Click, has connections with the police, and that whole warehouse incident, was it also the police helping you handle it?" Jack, however, said very seriously, "According to the rules of the underworld, if you go after someone else's boss, you have to pay the heaviest price." Xinjian sprayed out a mouthful of salty soda on the spot. "But you're not my wife, but you are my person. Provoking you is provoking me." Only then did Xinjian realize that between the two of them, it seemed like something had long since quietly tied them together. And this kind of entanglement made him start trusting the other party irrationally. His gaze, out of his control, drifted over to Jack. That shirt wrapped tightly around his figure, and that faint, clean, refreshing scent. "Hey, no matter how much you act like a decent person, it's useless. You're still a gangster." Chewing away, Xinjian heard this and couldn't help complaining in his head. That day when Jack left, he didn't even say a word to him. Jack said it was because Xinjian was sleeping like the dead and simply didn't hear him. Xinjian then pressed further. Jack's behavior that day didn't look like he liked men at all. Jack answered very bluntly that he really wasn't into that. Xinjian snorted on the spot, as if he had won another round, and burst out laughing. Then he got even more pleased with himself and said he could take the lead and make Jack happy. There was no way Jack would admit defeat. The two of them kept going back and forth like this, to the point of annoying the neighboring tables. So the two simply leaned in close, lowered their voices, and muttered quietly. In the end, Jack asked, "Are you confident you can make me happy?" When Xinjian looked utterly smug. What is there not to be confident about? What good is being Guangda anyway? With that, he opened his mouth wide and took a big bite of the hot dog. "Looks like you're really good at getting raises, huh? This is what you're showing off with? Even gangsters get a lunch break. Such great benefits. Pay close attention to their feet." After eating, when Xinjian looked up and saw yet another new car from Jack, and was instantly stunned. As expected of a rich gangster businessman, Jack actually got jealous. Last time, we mentioned Jack driving a brand new sports car to pick up Wen Xinjian. This car really was extraordinary. Even the engine starting up was a thunderous roar. Jack parked in front of a hotel. He told Wen Xinjian to stay in the car and wait. But when Xinjian couldn't sit still, his hand immediately reached out to touch it. Sure enough, something that expensive really has its own reasons. The person Jack was meeting turned out to be Boniel. Boniel joked with a smile. "Jack, why are you suddenly so eager to show off?" The two of them discussed some business related to the soon-to-open Kurang Hotel. Boniel said he had already gotten in touch with the Mexican suppliers and cleared all the checkpoints. He reminded Jack, this time he's done as much as he can to help, so next time when he needs to leave, Jack will have to help him. Jack teased him back, "You're like a walking road sign." When Xinjian volunteered to drive this time, you could tell he really liked it. But Jack said, "You almost landed yourself in prison, and all you can see is the car? Have you not thought about who worked so hard to pull it out from in there?" When Xinjian shot back, "If you want to blame someone, blame the one who brought the car over." Then he added, "Jack drives this car just to show off. Otherwise, he should be driving that one that's about to be scrapped. Who can tell me why Jack just has to drive this car?" Jack picked up his words, and when Xinjian got even more excited. "The problem with this car is it's too sexy." "What, is it to make it easier to run away?" Jack's hand went straight to Shin's thigh. "It's to make it easier to put the seats down." Do you guys know which meme this is? Tell me in the comments. Man, people really have no shame these days. But when Xinjian just doesn't blush, his whole mind is on this car. Jack tossed out another soul-searching question. "So, you've never tried this car model? Your focus is way off, isn't it? Besides, cleaning the seat cushions costs a lot of money. That little bit of money is nothing." Then Jack deliberately led him on again, bringing up what happened in bed that day. Jack deliberately led him on again, bringing up what happened in bed that day. When Xinjian suggested going to a clean bed to do yoga to exercise. But Jack shot back, "Isn't there still a clean hood?" As he spoke, he started groping Wen Xinjian again. But Wen Xinjian's brain was not broken. "Feels really good. But it's way too dangerous right now." Danger is what makes it exciting. Jack's tone grew colder, clearly displeased. When Xinjian lifted his hand and lightly patted Jack, his palm naturally fell on Jack's body, as if soothing him, reminding him that the parts of a luxury car are more fragile. The parts of a luxury car are more fragile. You have to handle them with care. Don't mess around. Tap, tap. Jack got jealous and deliberately flicked Ash into the car. Jack, you treating the car like your wife? When Xinjian frowned. What the hell? Have you ever even had a wife? You must have just treated some girlfriend like a wife, right? With the way you are, you won't even share a blanket with someone. But I'd be gone before we ever got under the blanket, right? That's more like you. What kind of constitution does Moon Sunjae have? Exactly? How come he's always being targeted by people? Jack and Moon returned to the repair shop. The blonde brat ran up to them excitedly, but the boss looked troubled. It turned out that a few minutes before they arrived, those two had made a bet, betting on whether the two of them would come back together or not. Obviously, the boss lost the bet, and another yellow-haired coworker disliked Jack even more. He asked coldly, "Is Moon your exclusive mechanic?" Jack answered bluntly, "Yeah, he's my exclusive, and I want to keep seeing interesting things until I get sick of them." The boss called Jack over and had him look at the Kurown Hotel themed custom car he had just finished modifying. As soon as the lights came on, they were blindingly bright, an instant unveiling. The boss was over the moon, even imitating that whole routine leaders use when they go on stage to give a speech. Before leaving, Jack left his sports car there, but drove off in Moon Sunjae's junker instead. Kurown Hotel was finally open for business. Whaledu tossed the repair shop $5,000 worth of chips, telling them to have fun tonight. Moon Sunjae felt a pang in his heart. If he had never met Jack in this life, he might never, for his entire life, have set foot in a place this high class. Aside from the boss loudly shouting in excitement, everyone else seemed not very interested in this casino. At that moment, a man in a sharp suit walked over. He raised his hand and pushed over a huge pile of chips. "Whaledu only gave you 5,000? That's so stingy. It's not like he's giving alms to beggars, and Bohm isn't giving alms to you either." After he finished speaking, he took a chip from inside and affectionately slipped it into Moon Sunjae's hand. This man was called Rozu, and he was the deputy general manager of the Kurown Hotel. The way he looked at Moon Sunjae clearly carried a strong interest. "Why don't you use the chip? I'm not interested in gambling. Are all repairmen this sexy? Will you still be this sexy after you finish fixing the car? You care so much about the balloon. Please regard my rudeness just now as if it never happened." At this moment, a waiter leaned toward the deputy general manager's ear and whispered a few words. It turned out that Whaledu had gotten into a quarrel with a guest, even alarming the police, and now 2 officers had come in. Rozu, however, acted as if nothing had happened and continued chatting with Moon Sunjae. He invited Moon Sunjae to go to a room upstairs, but Moon Sunjae was simply not interested. Rozu then said that his car could also be handed over to them for modification. Moon Sunjae turned to ask the boss, and the boss was grinning from ear to ear, with only business left in his eyes. The boss was smiling happily, with nothing but performance in his eyes, and even patted Moon Sunjae on the shoulder, telling him to work hard. Rozu led Moon Sunjae through the lobby. Unexpectedly, Moon Sunjae caught sight of a familiar figure. Why would Jack be here? What is he looking at? Rozu yanked Sunjae over with one pull. This episode really has a kind of 007 deja vu. Jack disguised himself as a police officer and took the opportunity to slip into the Kurown Hotel. He moved efficiently and took direct control of the monitoring station. Then he copied the data and took it away. As he was leaving, he accidentally caught Moon Sunjae's figure on the surveillance feed. At this moment, when Xinjian was being led by Rozu, about to go inside. This was completely outside of Jack's plan. Meanwhile, on the second floor, when Xinjian was at this very moment doing something that crossed Jack's bottom line, he was actually being held and kissed by Rozu. Shin, how could you do something that lets Jack down? Rozu brought Wen Xinjian into a room on the second floor. Inside was a whole group of people high on drugs. When Xinjian said seriously that drinking was acceptable, but this was not, then Rozu leaned in close to his ear, trying desperately to persuade him, saying it would make a person sink down, and even praising the benefits of that illusory dreamscape. When Xinjian laid it out bluntly, "You've gone to all this trouble to seduce me, what a pity." Just then, someone lost in a hallucination suddenly stepped forward and rudely cut them off. "You're under Rozu's protection too? Which gang are you with?" Then he started to humiliate Wen Xinjian, calling him a rag, saying he was nothing but a rag. When Xinjian couldn't hold back and swung a punch straight at him, Rozu frowned and reminded him, "Shun, you don't even know who he is, and you dare make a move on him directly?" Shun, however, was very calm. He was not in his right mind at the time. He won't remember who hit him. Rozu's emotions surged at once. "Thank you, Shun. You really stepped in for me just now. He hadn't expected that Shin was actually quite reasonable. He had originally thought Shin was just someone who would sell anything for money. He had just lowered his head, about to sink his teeth in, when a staff member suddenly came in. Deputy General Manager. Sorry to interrupt. The staff member hurriedly added, Deputy General Manager. There are police outside. Slip them some money and send them away. May I ask you to assist the police? The voice was Jack's. We received a report that someone is missing, he said. So it led us here. Jack was wearing a crisp police uniform and walked straight up to Wen Xinjian. Mr. Wen Xinjian. Yes, that's me. Wen Xinjian was stunned as well. Wen Xinjian had no idea what he was trying to do. He only heard Jack give a low command. Come here, Wen Shun. Come here, Wen Xinjian. As if being led on a leash, unconsciously took a step toward Jack. Step by step, he walked over to Jack. Wait, Rozu called out to stop them. Rozu asked coldly. As far as I know, all his companions are here. Who exactly called the police? Jack slanted a glance over as if saying, and you think you're qualified to ask that? The next second, he righteously led Wen Xinjian away. At a glance, Jack saw the marks on Wen Xinjian's neck. His movements instantly became rougher, harsher. Rozu was shaking with anger. The meat already at his mouth had actually just flown away like that. Even more outrageous was that the cop didn't arrest any of the junkies filling the room, and instead only took Wen Xinjian away. Rozu gritted his teeth and ordered, go investigate the information of everyone at the repair shop immediately, and then dig into that cop's background. This guy has 8 kidneys and 9 layers of scheming. He was born to be alluring. Even those seemingly pure clients were easily drawn away by him. They bickered on a daily basis. Once they got in bed, it was even more intense. Jack thought Wen Xinjian's clothes were too old and just threw them out. Then he turned around and casually tossed to Shun the clothes that Boniel had given him. This size is way too big. Is he deliberately making me wear his clothes? Just then, Shin's friend called. Shin picked up the phone and hid in the bathroom. The hickey on his neck was far too obvious. No matter how he tried, he couldn't cover it up. The friend told Shin that he had gone to ask around at the police station, and they only left him with one sentence. If you don't want to die with no one knowing, then stop asking. Shin heard the noise and realized Jack was right outside the door. He'd talked to him when they met. The next second, he saw Jack wearing a floral shirt. What kind of look is this supposed to be? Seeing that when Xinjian seemed about to go out, Jack asked where he was going. If I say I'm going to check out some newly arrived second-hand goods, would you believe me? He then said to Jack. Would you believe me? He then said to Jack again. You say you know what I'm afraid of because you're in the Mafia. But the reason I'm scared lies within myself. What he was really afraid of was that he'd be dragged into danger by Jack. But he didn't say the second half out loud. I get it. The so-called deal between us is just that bed. Whatever you give me, I'll accept. Thanks for the clothes. I'm leaving first. Shin arranged to meet his friend at a cafe. Let's just call this friend Little Fatty for now. Little Fatty also immediately noticed the marks on his neck. But Shin lied and said it was from a wrench accidentally scraping him while he was fixing a car. Little Fatty told Mun Xinjian. His friend had only been hacking in for 5 seconds before the authorities locked onto him. This kind of situation is rare. Now that Hacker Friend's combat power is maxed out, and he swore he'd definitely dig up all of Jack's background. Mun Xinjian thought back on the past. It seemed Jack was never afraid of him hearing things about himself. But if he really did find evidence proving that Jack wasn't a jobby person, would he actually be able to feel at ease instead? Bang, bang, bang. Little Fatty confessed that because Shun had once saved his life, he also wanted to give Mun Xinjian a hand. So he also wanted to give Mun Xinjian a hand and asked him to investigate the deputy general manager of the Kuran Hotel again. Information about Rozu. If we're talking about sales rankings at the repair shop, I'm afraid number 1 is still Mun Xinjian. Back at the repair shop, he immediately saw Jack's sports car and his heart sank, as if something had occurred to him. That day when he returned to the apartment, he saw that Jack had washed his clothes spotlessly clean and hung them on the door. Washed his clothes clean and hung them on the door. This gave Mun Xinjian the feeling that Jack had been watching him all along. It made him feel very uneasy. He started searching, wanting to see if there was a tracker on the car. Has the car broken down? Freckles greeted Shin and then asked him whether his neck was injured. Shin could only say helplessly that he had done it to himself by accident. He really racked his brains to cover up the awkwardness. Freckles told Shin that several of their colleagues had been gambling in the casino until the early hours before leaving. Then the boss rushed out and directly hugged Shin in tears, shouting, "My money, my house. Did you close that deal yesterday?" Turns out the boss had lost all his money. Shin told him it didn't go through. The other party wasn't interested, but in his heart he was thinking, I really can't tell the boss that what he was negotiating was just a flesh trade. Then the boss patted Shin again and pressed him, asking if he had changed his phone number. Sorry, the two of them only exchanged saliva. While chatting idly, Freckles said to Shun that compared with people who are very similar to ourselves, we are more easily attracted to people who are completely different from us, hehe. But in the end, Shun still felt that people are inherently contradictory. At the end of the day, you still have to find common ground in the other person, otherwise your heart can't really feel at ease. Freckles is quite young, about the same age as Moon Shinji's younger brother. This couldn't help but make Shin think of his own younger brother, Gulen. The Crown Hotel's Rozu walked into the repair shop carrying coffee. The boss was the first to rush out, but it turned out she had only used the excuse of a modified car to come look for Moon Shinjae. The boss could only have Moon Shinjae take the client on a tour of the repair shop. Rozu said straight to Moon Shinjae, I've taken a liking to you, so I used the car as bait to reel you in, but I'm sincere about both things. Then he asked Shin again, did that cop send you home yesterday? He also asked Shin if he knew that cop. Are you interrogating me? Or are you deliberately testing me? Rozu laughed in a low voice and said it was because he really wanted to work out. He then pointed at the spot on his neck where a patch was stuck. Here, isn't this what you left? Otherwise, why would that cop gnaw and bite all over this spot? Mun Sinjian coughed awkwardly. What's wrong? Are you feeling shy? Mun Sinjian then blurted out a line and regretted it as soon as he said it. You're actually pretty cute. Wah. The hell, what did you say? Rozu's ears immediately turned red. You're the first person to call me cute. Mun Sinjian could only drag the topic back to business. He asked where the car to be modified was. In the end, Rozu didn't even ask about the price. He directly said, regarding the car modification, everything would be left entirely to Shin to handle. Before leaving, he didn't forget to tease and flirt with Mun Sinjian over and over. The boss was so excited that he told Mun Sinjian to wait a moment so he could hand over the sales key to him. After speaking, he bounded off to see Rozu out. Jack was actually monitoring Mun Sinjian on surveillance. Rozu had long since had someone investigate Jack's background. The investigation results, no matter how they were turned over, showed only one person matching the dispatch record. The guy with the golden buzz cut. But when Rozu looked at the photo, he frowned. The appearance matched, but the vibe was wrong. He arrived at a certain dock. It turned out the person Rozu had arranged to meet was Boniel. Boniel got straight to the point. This matter involves business worth tens of billions. Of course, we have to see the other party's true face, the true ruler behind Crown Europe. While the two of them were talking, not far away Jack was staring at the surveillance feeds on his phone. Every move inside the repair shop was clearly seen by Jack. When Rozu saw Jack, he was obviously stunned for a moment. Can you explain why you're here? Looks like you still haven't figured out who I am. Jack told Rozu. Of course, the Jobby organization would plant its own people inside the Crown Hotel, and the dispatch record from that day was also real. He was warning Rozu to rein it in, so he wouldn't ruin the business between the two sides. Rozu turned his head and glared at Boniel. You don't trust me? So you're monitoring me? Boniel didn't know the grudge between the two of them, so he could only smooth things over awkwardly. With a deal worth tens of billions, being cautious is never wrong. Then he said to Rozu, from here on out, this business would be handled exclusively by Jack. The crystals would be shipped in from the district's port. Each shipment would be worth about $2 billion. He then looked at Rozu. Next, let's hear your plan. Rozu laid his cards on the table. This partnership was pure mutual exploitation. Then he went on to introduce to everyone a money laundering crew made up of security personnel. Jack reiterated in absolute terms. Anyone who dared mess things up would be eliminated on the spot. Rozu immediately understood that this man was not to be trifled with. At the moment of the final handshake, Rozu deliberately called his name wrong, calling Jack Jerry from Tom and Jerry. Boniel, standing to the side, corrected him in a cold voice. The chubby guy handed the information he had found on Rozu to Mun Sinjian. The files also pointed out who the real power holder behind the Crown Hotel Group was. That man was a playboy who had set up a charity foundation as a fig leaf just to suppress scandals. Flipping to the very bottom of the file folder, Mun Sinjian saw a photo that was different from the others. The chubby guy explained that Rozu's current face was the result of plastic surgery. Sure enough, in this world, money can buy almost everything. As a return gift, Mun Sinjian treated the chubby guy to a hot dog. The two of them had just bought their hot dogs and hadn't even had time to take a bite when a panicked man crashed into them and knocked everything to the ground. The chubby guy immediately cursed a few times at the man's back as he ran. The man turned back and spat something even harsher. You fat pig! Out of all the insults he could have picked, he just had to choose the one the chubby guy hates most. The chubby guy exploded on the spot and took off after him. Mun Sinjian hadn't planned on giving chase, but with one glance, he saw that the man was carrying a knife, and afraid something would happen to the chubby guy, he had no choice but to follow. There are always some places where even angel's light cannot reach, places where a crowd of people live like dust. They either keep sinking, falling into the abyss, or they struggle desperately, going head-to-head with fate. Mun Sinjian and the chubby guy chased the man all the way into an alley. The guy had a filthy mouth and filthy hands as well, hurling curses while provoking them. The chubby guy could actually fight no matter how fat he looked. Once he really started swinging, he was in no way inferior to anyone. After all, everyone was just scraping by at the bottom. Without real skills, how can you protect yourself? In the end, the two of them knocked all these little thugs to the ground. A gash was cut open on Wen Xinjian's arm. When Xinjian noticed that in the corner, there was someone trembling. That person was even wearing a very expensive watch on their wrist. He lowered his voice to remind him, "This place isn't very safe. Wearing a watch like that makes it easy for you to be targeted." Unexpectedly, the other's eyes lit up and he directly shouted, "Bro!" Tuoka took off his cap, revealing a freckled face. "Bro!" He lifted his head, the freckles plainly visible. "Bro? Don't you remember me? All these years, you still haven't changed at all, you're still so upright." It turned out he was the younger brother from Wen Xinjian's adoptive parents' home back then. The three of them, Gulen, went to Gulen's place. The three of them, Gulen, returned to Gulen's place. When Xinjian briefly treated his wound, after everyone's repeated persuasion, he finally changed into Gulen's pants. The chubby guy more or less saw that these brothers were reuniting after a long separation. Him just standing here felt a bit extra, and also a bit awkward. He immediately exchanged a look with Shin. Then he casually found an excuse and left. When Xinjian told Gulen that he's now working at a repair shop, Gulen was happy for him. This was the job Shin had wanted to do since he was a child. Gulen took out a group photo he had treasured for many years. He handed it to Wen Xinjian to look at. With that one look, Shin's memories were suddenly pulled back. The two of them were both adopted. Their adoptive father was a drug addict. When the addiction hit, Shin and Gulen would hide in the car. They slowly came to understand that this garage to them was not just a garage. It was more like their home. The car was warm, there were no rats, and it was very safe. Step on the pedal and they could go anywhere they wanted to go. He started to grow fond of this car. Their foster father often sent them out to buy drugs. In this way, they understood at a very young age. People swallowed up by this kind of drug are nothing but empty shells. When they grew a bit older, the oldest among them, Henri, joined a gang. Then he made them go sell drugs. But Shin and Gulen refused outright. Henri became even more vicious and bullied them more and more. And during those days, only Shin and Gulen could rely on each other. Shin treated Gulen like his own younger brother. He also took him along when he escaped from that home. Sitting in the church, Shin suddenly figured something out. In the face of pain, people really can let go of everything. Some people, in the end, choose to seek help from religion, and some choose to seek help from drugs. What's even more unfortunate is that, while they themselves are in hell, they still want to drag others down with them. When Shin and Gulen returned home, they found out that their foster father had already sold everything, and the children in the house had all scattered. The children in the house had all scattered, and Shin and Gulen were also forced apart and sent into different foster families. In the blink of an eye, the people who had barely managed to become a family turned back into strangers. A man like Jack, so strong and so self-disciplined, probably only exists in two-dimensional worlds. Gulen told Shin that their former big brother had been beaten to death by the gangsters. He died miserably, and could only be recognized by the scars on his face. Shin asked how he knew, but Gulen brushed it off vaguely, saying he had heard it by chance. Shin muttered under his breath, "Luckily I escaped back then, otherwise my ending would have been the same." Gulen also repeated that it was their brother who saved him. He told him not to call him G.E., Big Brother, anymore, just to use his name directly. But Gulen wouldn't agree, insisting that they had long been each other's only brothers. Gulen told Shin that the gangsters dealt drugs and killed people, but they would not lay hands on children. When they were kids, they even gave them food. When Xinjian told him not to be so naive. Back then, it was only to use them, but now we've grown up, we're no longer children. If we take one wrong step, we'll pay the price. Yet Gulen still wanted to argue. He felt that the suffering he had gone through didn't come from the gangsters, but from the people around him. Just then, Xinjian's phone rang. A blocked call. Jack asked where he was. It sounded like he wasn't at home. Yeah, your surveillance is really thorough. Jack said it was about time to do it, right? When Xinjian said, yeah, after I finish dinner and sit for a bit, it'll be just right. The two of them spoke bluntly on the phone. After some flirtatious back and forth, Jack warned him again to keep his lower half under control. Yo, when Xinjian shot back, worry about yourself first. You've broken a whole basketful of rules. Boniel casually fired a shot, muttering under his breath, those Russians really can't get anything done. Jack complained to him, if you want to vent, at least aim properly. Boniel also noticed that Jack had indeed been acting off recently. I'm not trying to interrogate you, but it was really unusual for you to come out of the crown that late that day. Whom you met and what you did is none of my business, and it shouldn't be my business. We don't drag our feet when we do things. Saying that, he picked up a gun and tested it. Jack immediately pulled a gun out from the desk. He fired a test shot on the spot. The gun was fine, so it still comes down to the person. Boniel smiled with a thoughtful look. The next day, Xinjian went to work and unexpectedly saw that Gulen had come too. He had even brought donuts and coffee for his co-workers. He said he wanted to see the place where his big brother worked. The boss held a brief morning meeting. It just so happened that Xinjian was on duty today, so the finishing work on Rozu's modified car was all handed over to Xinjian. After the meeting, the boss even gave everyone a bonus. It turned out that before Rozu left last time, he had stuffed in quite a lot of cash again. This time when Gulen came, every so often he would probe indirectly and ask Xinjian about Rozu. Xinjian didn't think anything of it, but I was the first to feel that something was off. Guys, there was a little secret in yesterday's episode 1. Did you spot it? Remember it. That's the key point. The next episode will be the high-energy Hood story. Between the car and Jack, which one will Xinjian choose? It was as if Jack already knew that tonight Xinjian would be the only one at the repair shop. When he came over, Xinjian was fully focused on fixing the car. He didn't even notice Jack coming in. Jack had always been especially bothered by the fact that Xinjian only cared about fixing the car and left him hanging to one side. Every word he spoke was so sour it tasted bitter. Xinjian said to Jack, Rozu gave too much money so everyone liked him. Jack sighed, it's really never enough. Xinjian replied, weren't you the one who told me to be a bit greedier? Xinjian also said he was very busy now and had no time to entertain him. Jack pressed up against him from behind. He said in a low voice, your service attitude is really not very enthusiastic. Xinjian jabbed him with his elbow and pushed him away. It'll get dirty here. Xinjian knew all too well how much of a neat freak the man behind him was, but Jack didn't seem to care at all. Instead, he moved in on him even more. He even asked, half deliberately, half casually, you're working on the most crucial part right now, aren't you? It looks very complicated. You're only asking because you're curious. Jack answered in a low voice, when Xinjian was very earnest and started explaining to him the principle of heating. In the end, after listening, Jack summed it up like this. Whether it's a car or a person, they're actually pretty much the same. The principle is just like sex. After he finished speaking, his hands also grew restless, deliberately teasing when Xinjian. In the end, he simply pinned him down on the hood of the car. This car is going to break. If it breaks, you can fix it. You're a mechanic, aren't you? What a bastard. Shameless. Saying no with his mouth, yet his body was being very honest. I've long had the feeling that you seem to really like cars. Jack finally did get jealous. Standing in front of when Xinjian, he actually couldn't even compete with a good car. Then the two of them started bickering again, and only then did Jack notice that when Xinjian's leg was injured. Key point. Jack discovered that when Xinjian's leg was injured, and when Xinjian finally understood, so Jack hadn't been monitoring the whole time. That's why he got into a fight with the thugs, got injured, but conveniently still brought back a client. The brown-haired one. When Xinjian yanked Jack's tie in one go, seeing how flushed with anger he was, Jack instead cared even more. It's right there in your phone. Guess which of those two cars had surveillance installed? When Xinjian told Jack, that was his younger brother. He also said it straight. Jack must have already investigated in secret long ago. So stop overthinking all that nonsense. But Jack deliberately flirted. Seems those who were adopted weren't necessarily all dead. They're all dead. When Xinjian fired back at Jack, how far have you gotten in your investigation? Jack looked at him and only replied with one line. Except for you, I don't care about anyone else. He was crazy. He was jealous. He even declared that he would forcibly take when Xinjian right in front of Gulen. Jack suddenly told when Xinjian a story. Two mice fell into a bucket of milk together. One chose to give up and died in the end. The other struggled desperately. And in the end, the milk would be churned into butter. He asked, which mouse are you? When Xinjian said, if I can do business off that butter. When Xinjian added, if he could do business off that butter, he would be very happy. Jack was very satisfied with this answer, worthy of being his mechanic. Jack seemed able to see straight through what Wen Xinjian was thinking. This was the first time when Xinjian had met someone like that. He felt lucky on the one hand, and on the other a bit regretful. He suddenly noticed that Jack was carrying a holster. Which Mafia member would go out carrying something like this? You still have the mood to look at that? Jack's tone dropped, and his movements grew even rougher. Feeling Jack's forceful thrusts, he was clearly enjoying it, yet also sinking deeper. The two of them seemed to be executing something at the same time, as if they had to force some sentence onto the other. They struggled even more fiercely, and they demanded even more ruthlessly from each other. When Xinjian had also wondered whether Jack might have installed a camera in the car, but seeing how shameless Jack always looked, he hadn't taken it seriously. It was just that he suddenly realized he really did seem to be enjoying this, and now Jack had noticed it too. You're this excited. It's like someone is watching you from the side. After a bout of entanglement ended, Jack pinched Wen Xinjian's face, staring at him up close. The left side of your face looks very gentle, but the right side of your face looks like the kind you don't want to mess with. Which side is the real you? Whichever side it is, it's all me anyway. It's you who's the real mess. I even thought you'd already prepared yourself to throw away your clothes before you pounced on me. The next day, when Xinjian could only report the matter of that car from Rozu as an operational error to his boss. The boss then turned around and reported the situation to Rozu, but Rozu insisted that when Xinjian answer the phone in person. As expected, he couldn't escape another round of ambiguous teasing. In the end, Hoxian even added a condition. Next time, bring alcohol and drink with him. He even emphasized again. Next time, bring alcohol and drink with him. Drink with him until he's completely drunk. The boss finished listening and was extremely satisfied. It even stirred up Wen Xinjian's ambition. Next time, they'd take down the clients around Rozu as well. When Xinjian stared at Jack's sports car, his gaze darkening, as if calculating something. I already said I'd wreck the car, you bastard. He clearly knew I was very dangerous. Yet we still couldn't control ourselves, inching closer and closer. Every part of my body was clearly reminding myself, this man is very dangerous, yet I still got entangled with him. Jack asked Rozu to meet at the church. Being ordered around by Jack, Rozu was of course displeased. Rozu told Jack he planned to open a shell company for laundering money, and for the company's manpower, they would use that money laundering organization. His own charitable foundation would also donate a portion every day in his name. Jack worried that doing this might cause trouble. Rozu told Jack not to worry. Jack warned Rozu once again, don't mess around. Gulen was actually one of them as well. Tonight he received an order. There would be an important operation. They arrived at the church where that charity was based. This was the place where, as a child, Shun had taken Gulen to hide. They never expected the deal would actually take place inside the church. Load the goods onto the car. On the road, everyone chatted about what they would do after finishing this job. But all Gulen wanted was to buy a big house and live there with his family. As they were talking, the leader suddenly spoke, telling everyone to turn off their phones. When Xinjian took from Little Fatty's hand information from the investigation on Gulen. Gulen is part of the underworld and the really dangerous kind at that. He served 4 years in prison for crimes like robbery, extortion, and intimidation. He's only just been released not long ago. At present, he is working his guts out for an organization called. When Xinjian was stunned on the spot, completely unable to believe it. Clearly that day in the alley, he had also laid hands on Gulen. The chubby guy lowered his voice again and told Shin that it was an organization specializing in money laundering. Recently, they have been working on a big deal with Jobby. Fork asked back, Jack didn't tell you? When Xinjian still wore that indifferent expression, as if he didn't care about anything, the chubby guy raised his hand again and made a gesture. Aren't you too? That kind of relationship? Alright, I was overthinking it. When Xinjian pulled open the drawer and took out the gun Jack had given him, he was gonna look for Gulen himself and get to the bottom of things. The car shot out its speed terrifyingly fast. I called several times, but Gulen's phone was turned off. Jack should have known all this long ago. Did he deliberately keep quiet? Was he hiding it from me? I remembered his previous warning. He told me not to dig, just to accept whatever he gave me. Bang. I slammed my fist hard on the steering wheel. He definitely knows. My entanglement with him is like an addiction. He's testing me. Testing whether I can accept all of him. He gave me a chance to start over. So am I supposed to hand over everything of myself? Suddenly, a blinding light shone straight toward Wen Xinjian, and the plot moves forward so smoothly it barely stops to breathe. If you haven't read it, pause for a few seconds first. Seriously, you won't be disappointed. Picking up from last time, a member proposed that the boss lead the team, take Joby's money and pull off one big job. But the boss refused. Acting now is too dangerous, Chedayo. Get the gear switched out first, then move immediately. When Shenjian, carrying a gun, dashed off to find Gulen. While he was driving on the road, a sudden glare of light came straight at him. He almost instinctively yanked the steering wheel hard. Luckily, his driving skills were solid enough, so he didn't crash into a tree. The other driver was a middle-aged uncle. He came over and asked if he was hurt. He kept urging Wen Shenjian to go to the hospital. But Wen Shenjian's mind was only set on hurrying off to find someone. He felt fine and didn't want to waste time on this. He refused again and again, but the middle-aged uncle still wouldn't let it go. He even said he would cover the medical expenses. With no way out, Wen Shenjian had no choice but to show his gun. Seeing the gun, the middle-aged man finally backed away. But on the other side, over at Gulen's, Jack had already disguised himself as a robber. Alone, he directly blew this whole operation wide open. He told the other side coldly, "You messed up the deal with Joby. Now there are only two options left. Either go to the police station and turn yourselves in, or die right now." The man begged Jack over and over. As long as Jack spared his life, he was willing to do anything. Then sell out Joby and Rozu. After saying that, he shifted his gaze to Gulen, who was lying on the ground to the side. "You're all wearing bulletproof vests, right?" The man nodded. Jack murmured, "Good," then raised his hand and fired the next second, the bullet heading straight for Gulen. After removing his disguise, Jack lowered his head and glanced at the incoming call. When Shinjian hadn't replied, he immediately dialed a strange number. He briefly explained the current progress. "The real people at the top don't understand street punks who've been driven into a corner.
Okay, you understand.
I'll report to the chief." As soon as that call ended, another one came in. As soon as he finished that, another one came in. "That man's movements don't seem right. I could only hit him once with my car." He reacted very quickly. "And he's pretty skilled. No matter how fast he runs, he can't be faster than Jack. No matter how deep he hides, he can't hide from Jack. He has a gun on him." I felt something was wrong, so I kept following him. He's now at, it looks like, Gulenheim's home. Jack had long anticipated that when Shunjian would discover Gulen's true identity. He just hadn't expected that when Shunjian would go over there with a gun. Wait, is Gulen really that important to him? I gave him that gun, but not for him to use it on other people. What an unfathomable guy. Since that's how it is, I can only personally drag him back. A person who has always been powerful and rigorous actually got hit by a bullet from a small thug. And that thug is even his own brother-in-law. When Shinjian was waiting for Gulen at the bottom of Gulen's apartment building, he had already smoked quite a few cigarettes and made several phone calls as well. The longer he waited, the more annoyed he became. Jack walked over slowly from a distance, hands in his trouser pockets. "Are you waiting for someone?" When Shinjian glanced sideways, giving him a cold look. "Gulen can't possibly not answer my calls, right? He's not a child. He'll come back when it's time," Jack said lightly. "Are you worried about him?" When Shinjian let out a low laugh. "What, you even know where he lives?" Jack stepped closer again. "Didn't you say you're doing a deal with him? So what?" Jack looked down at him from above. When Shinjian felt that Jack had been hiding things from him about Gulen, that made his anger surge straight up. But Jack explained that he didn't want a third person wedging themselves between the two of them. He smoothly wrapped his arm around her waist, his fingers slowly stroking. He told Wen Xinjian that even if you pointed a gun at my brother, you still wouldn't get the answer you want. If you want to threaten an opponent who truly understands you, you have to make him certain that you will pull the trigger, just as you also know that I will pull the trigger on you. Bro. Gulen's voice suddenly sounded right against his ear. He had come back at the worst possible moment. Gulen asked in shock, "Why is Wen Xinjian with Jack?" Panicking, he yanked out his gun and shouted at Wen Xinjian, "Come here, now. He's one of Joby's people. He'll kill us." Those words made Jack's gaze darken. "When you say us, who do you mean?" "Only when Wen Xinjian is with him can it count as us." What on earth happened? When Xinjian forced down his anger, "Gulen, calm down." When Xinjian held back his temper and told Gulen, "Calm down." But Gulen had already lost control completely. In Gulen's heart, Wen Xinjian was his only family. But now, when Xinjian was standing on the enemy's side, Jack froze where he was, staring fixedly at the opposite side. But he didn't make any further move. Jack, who was always so meticulous, should have been pulling everything that had gone wrong back on track. Yet he didn't move at all. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. The bullet flew, Jack didn't dodge, and was brutally hit in the side of his waist. When Xinjian questioned Gulen on the spot, "What are you doing?" Gulen was so flustered that he trembled, but stubbornly said, I'm doing it all for us. Shun turned his head and glanced at Jack. He made up his mind to stay and shouted at Gulin, "Go, go now." Jack, who had been shot, began a soul-searching over why he hadn't dodged just now. Do I actually care that much about that guy? He raised his hand and pulled Wen Xinjian into his arms. Didn't you hear? Your brother told you to get lost. Gulin's eyes went blank. He struggled a few times, and in the end could only run off in disgrace. Why didn't you run with him? The next second, Wen Xinjian suddenly grabbed Jack's hand. If I go with him, the two of us will both die. Jack let out a low laugh. You really understand me. Then be good and stay by my side. After someone's been shot, how long does it actually take before they die? A tough person, even after taking a bullet, can dig the bullet out with their bare hands. Jack was exactly that kind of ruthless character. When Xinjian supported Jack and helped him back to his place. Yes, just a place to live, not a home. On the way, he either complained there were too many stairs or that Jack was too heavy. When they finally reached the door, he even complained about how narrow the door was. Jack teased him back. Don't tell me you think you're that small. As soon as they went in, Jack casually grabbed a bottle of whiskey. When Xinjian stared at his wound, wanting to send him to the hospital, but Jack looked completely at ease. His expression was calm as he poured himself a glass of whiskey. Then he had Wen Xinjian help him unbutton his clothes. Wen Xinjian was truly stunned. This was a gunshot wound. How could he possibly act like nothing had happened? Jack told him to look carefully at himself, as if he were looking in a mirror. Then he had him point out where the bullet was, just below the old wound. Jack's gaze stayed locked on Wen Xinjian, who sat across from him, but his hand briskly picked up the tweezers, dabbed a bit of whiskey, and jabbed straight into that wound. The next second, he forcibly dug the bullet out. The whole time he didn't let out a single cry. At most, he only furrowed his brows. He even muttered under his breath, "The same spot, and I actually got hit twice." When Xinjian looked at him and only felt that this man was a complete madman. So it turned out that even after being shot, you don't die right away. Jack grabbed the whiskey and gulped a few mouthfuls down his throat. He also lifted his chin a little, signaling for Wen Xinjian to drink a few sips as well. He even said outright that what came next would be more complicated. When Xinjian asked him what would happen to Gulin, Jack said he hadn't thought about it yet. Right now, he only wanted to rest first. When Xinjian moved a little closer and heard Jack murmur in a low voice, he looked at Jack's face, pale and utterly devoid of color. Only the burning heat where their fingertips touched proved that he was still alive. When Xinjian stared at him, as if thinking about something, Jack always kept himself very tidy. Even when making love, it was the same, he never lost control. But he had never seen him looking this disheveled and defenseless. You like this now, it's really not like you. He bent down and murmured softly by his ear. Even if you're strong enough to take out a bullet by yourself, accidents can still happen. Even if, in front of me, you stay that clean and that composed, you, in the end, are also just someone who will walk to the very end. Sleep, Jack said in a lowered voice. He suddenly remembered that just now Jack had told him to obediently stay by his side. He thought, of course he would do as told, because if he wanted to save Gulin, there was no better way than this. The timeline of this episode is set on the very day when the male and female leads first meet. Look carefully. There's a lot of information and it's very crucial. On Jack's side, the organization has already planned an operation to bring down the Mexican crime syndicate. The higher UPS also ordered him to start preparing to crack down on the Russian Rosu gang. And all of this will be packaged as news of the rise of the Jobby organization. They even arranged a new car for Jack. Guns had already been placed in the back seat in advance. Just at this moment, Mun Xinjian has just been rejected by a client and walks over with a sigh. But on Jack's side, he also discovers that this car is broken. Thus, we get the opening of the first episode. Although Jack guessed that Mun Xinjian wouldn't be able to fix this car, he didn't expect Mun Xinjian to directly wreck the car completely. Jack is so furious that he immediately turns around to look for the strongest extra. Who would have thought that the car in front of that hot dog truck on the street actually had something shady going on? Jack questions him on the spot. Why is the car you gave me broken? He even threatens him. There's no use keeping you around. You can't even figure out something this simple, your hands ought to be chopped off. The extra is way too wronged. This really isn't my fault. Jack throws him a phone number and tells him to go investigate. The extra said, do you think this is the higher UPS testing you? Do you think this is the higher UPS testing you? Do you think this is some kind of top secret business of the higher UPS? But you're not just going to sit there and take the bullying, right? They tracked down Moon Sunjae, a Korean American. Jack decided to seize on his weak spot and use it. He'd heard that calling a person by their name is the most intimate form of greeting. The next second, In a very gentle tone, he spoke the extra's name. Izumil. The extra visibly shuddered on the spot. You'd better not call me that. It scares me. Then Jack told him to pull up Moon Sunjae's entire detailed file. He wanted to personally confirm who exactly this name belonged to. After Jack finished going through the file, he knew Moon Sunjae's entire past, including his previous criminal record. Correction. Moon Sunjae's ex-boyfriend was not violent. Moon Sunjae was blackmailed by his ex with the charge of assault causing bodily injury. That case immediately became one of the top 5 most disgusting gay scandals in the Detroit Police Department at the time. Additional note, Moon Sunjae didn't have those fetishes. His ex-boyfriend forced him to go along with him, so he really was destroyed by his ex. He lost his job and his reputation was shattered. As expected, he's not an ordinary guy. Even with a gun pointed at him back then, his eyes still had that I don't care look. Jack recalled the scene from their first encounter. Those lips were so sexy that, in an instant, he felt an urge to touch them. So by this point, it's basically certain Jack was the one who first took a liking to Moon Sunjae. And that look in when Shinjian's eyes back then, like he was staring at prey, was actually just because. Jack said, "A delicious breakfast. What is it really like?" Jack woke when Shinjian up. "My arm won't lift," he said. "Help me rewrap the bandage." But when Shinjian saw at a glance, he had taken a shower and even put on waterproof tape. "What do you mean it won't lift?" Lying again. Jack once again clearly explained to him that he had no intention of getting involved in their family disputes. So on rest days, there was no need to deliberately keep an eye on him. At least for now, that was the case. What a brat asking for a beating. Jack threw 2 sets of his own clothes over, signaling when Shinjian to put them on. When Shinjian frowned and cursed at him, "You're this badly injured and still going out? And also, why do I have to wear your clothes?" Jack replied coolly, "Because your clothes are stained with blood. If you don't want the police to take you away, then behave and change." Then he took Wen Shinjian to that restaurant they often went to. The waiter casually asked, "Bringing a handsome guy with you today, huh?" Which made Wen Shinjian lift his hand to cover his mouth and secretly chuckle. He laughed openly and took the chance to say to the waiter, "Give me the same order he's having." Jack stared at his smile, a bit puzzled. When Shinjian then said, "Don't always smile so fakely. If you want to laugh, open your mouth and laugh. If you want people to like you, even if you're faking it, at least make it look real." Jack shot back, "You're the one who said to fake it. So why aren't you smiling now? Aren't you supposed to be pleasing me?" Wen Shinjian snapped right back, "Do you want to see me smiling at you? Or do you want to see me laughing at you?" The moment the two of them stopped moving, they started bickering. When Shinjian took a bite of the toast, frowned, and asked Jack, "This is the delicious breakfast you were talking about? Just this? It's just ordinary toast." He looked at Jack sitting opposite him, eating in a refined manner, and felt even more confused. Jack seemed to guess what he was thinking and said lightly, "My dad is very strict about table manners." When Shinjian grew even more curious, "You actually have a family? You didn't think I fell from the sky, did you?" "What? I didn't?" Then Jack started telling him about his family. He said, "My parents are both still alive. I just rarely see them." When Shinjian sneered and added a jab, "Of course you don't see them. You're busy dealing drugs every day. Where would you find time to meet?" Jack immediately saw that whenever family was mentioned, when Shinjian's emotions would stir. When Shinjian added another line, "Gulen isn't related to him by blood, and that guy isn't clean either." When Shinjian immediately defended himself, saying he didn't deserve to die, that it was normal for gangs to shoot at each other. Jack merely let out a low sigh. Rozu held back his anger and stormed off to find Boniel. As soon as he opened his mouth, he blamed him. The operation failed. Boniel wore a professional fake smile and replied with a squinting grin, "Isn't money laundering your job? Don't just open your mouth and make things up." Even lighting a cigarette, he gave off a crushing sense of pressure. Walking down the street, the two of them absolutely had the aura of big bosses. Rozu insisted, "It was either Boniel or Jack who ruined the operation." Boniel coldly reiterated, "You were the one who insisted on using those ex-security guards." Rozu told Boniel, "There was one person missing at the scene. Must bring him back and interrogate him directly." He stared at Boniel and asked where Jerry went, deliberately putting extra weight on the name Jerry. A flash of displeasure crossed Boniel's eyes for an instant. For something this big, someone has to go and calm the boss down. When Jack was paying the bill, the young cashier girl said when Shinjian was very handsome and told Jack to bring him more often, so she wouldn't have to eat all alone. Fortunately, when Shinjian didn't hear that, or he would definitely have been overjoyed again. When Shinjian wanted to call Gulen, but he still had to find a chance to borrow a light first. Just as he opened his mouth to ask for a light, Jack silently appeared at his side. "Can't you make some noise when you walk?" Suddenly, two police officers walked past, chatting as they went about last night's gang shootout. "If you don't have a lighter, what are you smoking for?" These two, even just lighting a cigarette is this eye-catching. Jack pinched Wen Shenjian's chin and lowered his voice. "I told you this morning." He glanced at the police over there, his tone even heavier. "Good thing I made you change your clothes." The two of them walked side by side down the street, aura cranked to the max, like two big bosses out on the town. Yet they still couldn't stop sniping at each other. One complained first, "It's just a meal. Do we really have to walk this far?" The other replied lightly, "You were clearly enjoying your food just now." He shot back at once, "And you're not in pain? Just bear with it. Getting shot really isn't something worth showing off about." "Long time no see, handsome boy. Are you going on a date with me today?" Suddenly, an old granny took the initiative to greet Jack. Jack glanced at Wen Shenjian and replied crisply, "No, I already have plans today. The sweater is really nice, really nice. Looks like this area is your turf." Jack explained calmly, "Didn't you notice? This is a retirement community. We can't very well act like vicious criminals in front of them." The two of them returned to Jack's place. One walked into the bathroom, looking for a chance to call Gulen. The other stayed outside and started contacting the organization's underlings to report the situation to Jack. The underlings replied, "The organization has already disguised the case as a gang shootout." Kaisaru asked Jack how Wen Shenjian is doing now. It turned out Kaisaru was the person Jack had planted at the repair shop specifically to keep an eye on Wen Shenjian. "I'm starting to feel sorry for Wen Shenjian. His intuition wasn't wrong. Jack is monitoring him in 360 degrees. Kaisaru directly blamed Jack. "You shouldn't have dragged unrelated people into this." Jack checked Wen Shenjian's pistol and found that the magazine was already empty. "I went to all that trouble to bring the gun for you, and now I still have to refill your bullets." No one was answering Gulen's phone, but Jack outside the door was about to come in. Just how much does Jack love Wen Shenjian? I think the way he keeps getting jealous of Gulen over and over is obvious enough. In his heart, Wen Shenjian quietly made a plan. He was going to let Jack come in, and he wanted Jack to see with his own eyes that he was on the phone, because Jack had been testing him all along, and this time he felt it was time to turn the situation around. TSK. Too bad Gulen still wasn't picking up. Jack was just about to push the door open and come in. He could only pretend he was in the middle of a call with Gulen. "I'll contact you, Gulen. Take care of yourself too." He deliberately pronounced the name Gulen very clearly. "There are quite a lot of people who worry about you. You've been glued to your phone all day, yet I haven't seen you spare much concern for the patient." "Patient? You mean the one who looks perfectly lucid and can even dig a bullet out of his own stomach?" Jack swung the door shut behind him. He asked Mun Xinjian why, on the night he fell asleep, he never called him. Mun Xinjian said that maybe he had been too tired at the time, so he forgot. Then he went on to tell Jack not to interfere in Gulen's affairs anymore. Jack suddenly grabbed him by the throat. "Wasn't the mood pretty good today? Why do you have to bring him up in front of me like it's nothing?" Jack was finally unmistakably jealous. Riled up, he directly lifted Mun Xinjian's whole body off the ground. Then he turned on the shower. "Like you said, it's normal for gangsters to shoot at each other. So why exactly am I supposed to just let it go?" Jack had heard Mun Xinjian explain the cause of his injury so offhandedly back at the restaurant. In that soft little laugh of his, all he could hear was heartache. "Yes, he fired at me, but you still want me to act like nothing happened. Does Gulen really matter that much to you? You're planning to keep going with a body full of bullet holes?" Mun Xinjian had already figured it out. Right now, if he wanted the other man to calm down, it seemed that having sex was the only option left. And even if he didn't sleep with you, he had a whole bunch of other ways. "Maybe halfway through, I would already let that mouse Keiko go." "Bastard, sure enough, this is exactly the kind of attitude that fits you. TSK. Compared with quietly eating breakfast like this today, this kind of roughness at this moment is what he's most familiar with. Didn't you just say you wouldn't do it? It's just that I've got bullet holes in my stomach. My hands are still perfectly fine." "Fine, whatever I say, it still counts as your win, Jack." How would Jack react to being called old man? Rosu's car was finally fixed. The boss ran off excitedly to report it. Shin found a chance to go out and call the little fat guy. TSK, he didn't get any useful information out of the little fat guy. But after they talked, Shin began to suspect Jack had voluntarily given up this deal and had conveniently spared Gulen's life. If that's really the case, then how does he plan to face the consequences? Shin started worrying on Jack's behalf. When they parted in the morning, Jack handed the pistol to Shin and even asked him, were the bullets used up or put away? Shin didn't answer and Jack didn't press him. Shin then said that once the bullets were fired off, he would refill them at any time. Shin also said that before he pulled the trigger, Jack would definitely show up. Jack gave a knowing smile. Jack still went to a doctor to have his wounds treated, and at the same time called Kaisaru. Kaisaru complained that he had to repair the car again and keep an eye on Mun Sinjian. He was really exhausted, but Jack urged him to give a full, detailed report. Gulen's drug addiction flared up. He was trembling on the street, desperately looking for an antidote, and the drug dealers immediately recognized him. He is exactly the man Jabi is hunting down. So everyone escorted Gulen straight in front of Rozu. Rozu was convinced that it was Gulen who killed the others in the organization, and he also suspected that it was Jabi's people who had transferred the money away. He threatened Gulen on the spot, forcing him to reveal the mastermind behind the scenes. Gulen shouted, "I really don't know anything." Just then, the assistant rushed in a panic. "The police are here." Rozu had no choice but to leave Gulen behind for the moment. It turned out that the extra had barged in with the corrupt cops. That corrupt cop first called out to the extra, saying he was Agent Izumil. He also said, "If anything comes up, just call me. I'll fully cooperate." Jack was waiting for them right outside. The moment the extra saw Jack, his whole body went rigid and started trembling. "You didn't have to show up in person," the extra said, but Jack replied, "If I don't make a move, we'll have to let that bunch of dirty cops drag him out by force, which is a huge waste of time. But now, we only need to keep one police leader under control." In the car, Gulen woke up and murmured in a daze, "Uncle? Huh? Who are you calling uncle?" Jack and the extra raised their eyes at the same time, their gazes turning cold in an instant. Jack dragged Gulen to a more secluded spot. He directly threw him down and warned in an icy voice, "You must leave this city at once. Otherwise, everyone around you will be in trouble. This is the last time I'm going easy on you. From now on, which path you take is up to your own choice. One is an undercover agent, and the other is a street mechanic. He falls for him at first sight, yet treats him as a key target, tailing him around the clock, torn and suspicious. But in the end, he still falls into this relationship step by step. The villain Rozu gets away, but he is furious. Every year he throws so much money at those dirty cops, and he still ends up being played like this. At this moment, the repair shop owner called and said that Rozu's car had already been fixed. Rozu happened to be upset and distracted, so he simply asked Mun Sunjae to come and fulfill the promise he'd made while drinking before. Sun had already gone to bed. Forced to get up, he had no choice but to drive that modified car to the appointment. On the way, he suddenly remembered that time at the Kurown Hotel. Jack showed up there unexpectedly, yet pretended not to know him. There had to be a reason for that. The scene shifts to a certain clubhouse, once again full of neon lights and revelry. Rozu sent the others away, leaving only Mun Sunjae to drink with him alone. The next second, he started putting his hands all over Sunday. Sun saw the bloodstain on his cuff and immediately tensed up a bit inside. Sun pressed down his hand and coldly reminded Rozu, "You only modified the car, you didn't buy it. A customer should act like a customer." Mun Sunjae refused very straightforwardly, but Rozu clearly didn't want to stop. He directly pushed Mun Sunjae down onto the sofa. "People only speak the language of money. You still dare to put on airs with me." He lowered his head and lightly licked Sun's neck. Sun's mind went buzz for a moment, and he instantly thought of Jack. He assumed there must have been something slipped into the alcohol for things to get this out of control. But Rozu told him, "There's no drug in the wine." Mun Sunjae completely exploded and started to fight back. He swung a punch straight at his face. "You lunatic! How dare you touch my face? I've already done what I was supposed to do. Here's the key. If you've got money, go get your nose fixed. Don't waste it on me." Walk out of the club. Shin stands at the door, looking at that freshly modified car. Now, how is he supposed to explain this to the boss? Just now, should he have gone along with him for once? He raises a hand to touch the hickey on his neck. Right at that moment, the honk from across the street forcibly yanks his attention away. When Shinjian smiles knowingly, "This Jack, if you'd come out one step later, it would have turned into a three-person encounter. What a pity." He knocks on the hood. "You never planned on getting in the car, did you?" He then bends down again, staring at you. "Where's your police uniform? Switch to being a taxi driver today? Get in." When Shinjian has just sat down, Jack yanks him over in one swift motion. He lowers his head and carefully checks, making sure he hasn't touched any contraband. But the very next second, he still sees the hickey. "What's going on with this? Didn't I tell you to keep your lower half under control? I just threw a punch at the guy earlier." For Jack's safety, the best thing now is to leave here immediately. Since we're gonna fall into the abyss, then we'll go down together. The wipers squeak back and forth. "Don't you find that sound grating? I haven't driven this car in a long time." Jack glances sideways at him, giving him a once-over. Seeing Wen Xinjian's strained little expression, he deliberately asks, "What's wrong?" When it comes to cars, Wen Xinjian really, truly loves them. He rattles on about how to change the wipers and what model to use. In the end, Jack just tosses out one line, "Then you do it." Then the two of them drive off to the repair shop. Shun is very suspicious about Jack showing up in the middle of the night. Jack says at that moment the only place he could think of that could actually do repairs was here. Jack asked him, "Before you met him, did you come out early every morning to look for prey?" When Xinjian said not every day, only occasionally. Only when he was lucky would he run into a luxury car. Only occasionally. Only when he was lucky would he run into a luxury car. He happened to hear the sound of your car engine malfunctioning and even asked Jack, "Did you have drugs hidden in the car at the time? If I were an undercover cop, you definitely wouldn't have gotten away," he added. "Given what you said, I figure it won't be long before you get yourself out of this." Jack snorted with a laugh. "Whether you're a mechanic or a cop, I'm sure of one thing. I'm very lucky. Is this your way of confessing to me?" Late at night, Jack drove Wen Xinjian back to the apartment. Before leaving, Wen Xinjian stared at him and asked, "What did you really come here for today?" "Just to set off a few strings of firecrackers. Like I promised you before, I got that guy out." "What? You saw Gulen?" When Xinjian couldn't hold back his excitement, Jack told him, "Gulen's nature is hard to change. Now that he's been branded a traitor, from now on he can only rely on himself to survive. Anyway, thank you," When Xinjian suddenly said. Jack was clearly stunned. "That's not like you. At least, the you I know wouldn't say something like that. I really don't know what you think I'm like." Jack turned around. "I'm leaving." He gave a soft little laugh again. "I'm leaving." Jack gave a soft little laugh again, with a trace of loneliness in it, as if laughing at himself, at why he would go this far for him. The light fell on Wen Xinjian, but Jack did not leave right away. When Xinjian remembered Jack's warning, "Since you're already entangled with me, you have to acknowledge me," his steps stopped. "Even if I don't say it, I already acknowledged you long ago." He turned back. The light was still on, and Jack was still there. "I know I was wrong, but I don't want to miss you just because you're in the mob." When Xinjian quickly walked back to the car, he put his leg directly onto Jack's knee. He pressed down onto his back without any hesitation. He lowered his head and kissed him hard. Their fingers tangled together, and the tips of their tongues tangled together too. Jack laughed softly. "How about this then? Now that's more like you. Since we're going down into the abyss." He stared at him. "Then come in." He handed the invitation to him. He hadn't expected things to turn out like this. Jack spoke toward the monitoring console. "Today's surveillance ends here. Turn off the bug." Then, before Izumil could react, Jack directly switched off the listening device, killed the engine, and got out of the car. Xinjian broke Jake's expectations again and again, but this sense of contrast only made Jake unable to stop. Back to the main point, Xinjian invited Jake to his own place. Jake swiftly took off his headphones and followed without a word. As soon as Xinjian walked in the door, he took that bundle of cash into his hand. His expression was so conflicted it was like he got stuck. Isn't that ever-growing pile of stuff in the drawer just the physical form of his tangled emotions? He was still zoning out when a knock suddenly sounded at the door. Before Xinjian could react, the impatient person outside was about to barge straight in. On the surface, Jake looked very proper, suit immaculate, like a stern old cadre, but the restless fire in his heart was practically written all over his face. He was basically a hidden, suit-clad thug variant. Turned on and excited, Jake in that moment seemed to seize the initiative. He lifted his chin, full of presence, and headed straight toward the bed. Poor Xinjian, because of the height difference, could only be carried off by Jake like a little chick. The scene was indescribably comical. Jake was burning with impatience, yet still took the time to deal with the marks on Xinjian's neck. His movements looked fierce, yet somehow managed to make one's heart itch. The more Xinjian thought about it, the stranger it felt. Why does this guy seem like he's on fast forward today? Jake couldn't care less about that and directly hit Xinjian's sensitive spots with precision. He worked Xinjian until he was dizzy, completely losing control over his own body. Jake even pretended to be pitiful, saying he had nowhere to live, and Xinjian's already wavering heart. That one sentence pierced straight through, leaving him no time to even build a defense. In Jake's heart, Xinjian is a one-of-a-kind, limited edition treasure. But Xinjian doesn't give Jake any chance to get sentimental. This is not the time for love talk. He's almost gotten used to using the hand cream, but the money in the drawer beside it hasn't been touched at all. Jake even complained he didn't know how to spend it. Maybe he should buy a bed you can actually hold on to. That intention doesn't need any explanation. The gentle moonlight falls into every corner, as if it's lighting their interactions for them. The two of them actually don't say much, but that indescribable feeling in the air just pulls people deeper and deeper, just when the ambiguity between them is about to spiral out of control. Sinjen still remembers to remind him, "Don't take off the clothes, my dear officer uniform." T-lover Jake thinks to himself, "With such a cute request, how could I possibly refuse?" But don't forget, behind the sweetness, danger is hiding too. Sinjen knows very well. In the organization, no matter how high Jake's rank is, as long as he dares to betray them, his end will definitely be miserable. Spacing out at a time like this, Jake makes Sinjen look at him and stop overthinking. Jake meets Sinjen's gaze, and in that instant it's like a current runs through his whole body. His head is stuffed full of excitement. All he wants is for Sinjen to keep calling his name. After that, Sinjen also played the baby for once and had some milk. Both of them really enjoyed the whole process. Looking down at the floor again, it was a total mess of Sinjen's clothes, and only Jake's pair of leather shoes were still placed neatly. The next day, Sinjen groggily woke up from his dream. A bunch of question marks instantly popped up in his mind. When did I fall asleep? Thinking back on everything from last night, this was actually the first time he had blacked out. And that Jake, who always loved sneaking off in the middle of the night, was actually still lazing in bed at dawn, having a formal late-night talk session with Sinjen. Neither of them could keep pretending anymore. They both knew in their hearts. This relationship had already changed. Jake couldn't help complaining beside him. "Even if I want to hold you, you still insist on sleeping on your stomach. This habit has to change." But to Sinjen, the whole scene felt nauseating. These two really did start bickering as the very first thing upon waking. Then Sinjen just lay there like a corpse, staring blankly at the ceiling. That dumb look of his made Jake's heart itch. He especially wanted to know what exactly was going on in Sinjen's mind. In his heart, Sinjen silently replayed everything that had happened between them from the moment they met up to now. Starting out as a street mechanic, then stumbling by sheer accident into this job. The more he thought about it, the more he felt like a puppet being led by strings in Jake's hands. Jake hadn't forced him, yet it was as if he had laid all the options in front of him. He had to choose even if he didn't choose. Jake's methods were too sophisticated, so sophisticated that you couldn't even bring yourself to truly hate him. Despicable in a way that was just right. But in Jake's view, this was nothing more than the process of Sinjen making the right choice. If staying by your side is the right choice, then our relationship will become even better than before. It seems their relationship has finally become different. Identity grand reveal. Jake comes from the Special Forces. Deputy Director of Operations Ralpyu calls everyone in for a meeting. They discuss a case of civil servants colluding with a crime syndicate. They suspect the mayor of New York and the Rozu group of having improper dealings. Jake points out, if the Mercy organization wants to let the drugs circulate, then Rozu can launder money for them. Ralpyu adds, the more we dig, the stranger it gets. The people behind this are terrifyingly high level. This kind of crackdown operation is a real headache. And as someone from the Special Forces, Jake should know that best. Through Ralpyu, we finally confirm Jake's identity. He used to be in the Special Forces. Ralpyu sighs once again. If we don't completely sever these ties with the corrupt government, the country is doomed sooner or later. Jake complains. You've been repeating that same line over and over for years. Ralpyu's gaze darkens, and he throws a dagger look, locking his eyes on Jake. Clues found a month ago also showed the mayor of New York is nothing more than a minor player. After that last chaos, competition among the gangs spun completely out of control, like they'd gone mad. The tension in the air is so thick it's hard to breathe. Now we just wait and watch them tear each other apart. As soon as the meeting ends, the poor extra in charge of wrapping things up grimaces. Time to go give another solo report. Kaisaru scratches his head, unable to figure out why Jake keeps hiding his true identity. Jake can only sigh helplessly. If Sinjen knew, he'd probably let out a huge sigh of relief on the spot. But Sinjen is just an ordinary person. The less he knows, the safer he is. Jake still didn't forget to press Kaisaru. You bastard. Why are you so hung up on that guy? When Kaisaru hurried to explain. Sinjen is my colleague, of course I'd worry about him. Someone like you who kills without batting an eye, what would you understand? Since when did you start treating the repair station like a proper, serious workplace? Kaisaru said, working at the repair station is my happy home. Only there can I truly relax. And there are those three idiots too. Don't be fooled by how normal Sinjen looks on the surface. He's actually a bit crazy as well. Jake asked, crazy how? When Sinjen works, he has to push himself to complete exhaustion before he'll stop. It looks like professionalism, but his obsession with cars is a bit over the top. Jake grinned smugly. And in that head of his that's filled only with cars, There's still room left for me. Just thinking about it is exciting. You lunatic. If Sinjen saw your true colors, he wouldn't even see you as a human being. Watching him slowly see my true colors is actually pretty fun. Sinjen took Jake's clothes out from the wardrobe and handed them to him to put on. As Jake took the clothes, he joked, I didn't expect you hadn't thrown my clothes away. Throwing them out would have been such a waste. I was actually planning to take them to a secondhand shop and resell them. Jake lowered his head and looked at the piece of clothing. That's great then. Should I be glad that this outfit isn't as wrinkled as I thought? Put the clothes aside for now. What we should be thinking about is, where can we buy that kind of bed people will want to grab onto? Sinjen looked completely puzzled. Why waste money like that? I can just make a headboard myself. Jake immediately fired off 3 questions in a row. Where are you making it? What are you making it with? How are you making it? Sinjen said, it's not complicated. TSK, do this first, then that, and it's done. Jake chuckled softly. Sure. Better to just go buy one later. Suddenly, Sinjen noticed something quite shocking. Wait. Where are your underwear? Yours are too small, I can't fit in them. Jake just went in completely commando like that. In the afternoon, Sinjen went to the abandoned car factory to look for parts with everyone. Not seeing Kaisaru, Sinjen casually asked about him. The bearded guy said he'd taken the day off, and the boss chuckled. Don't tell me he's got himself a boyfriend now? Then he asked about Rozu's reaction when he saw the car. Seeing how worried Sinjen looked, he got even more curious. What kind of reaction is that? Sinjen said Rozu didn't come to modify the car at all. He clearly had an ulterior motive. The boss frowned. Don't tell me he's trying to get you to do drugs? Fortunately, everyone here is a good kid. We strictly oppose porn and drugs. We strictly oppose porn, gambling, and drugs. The boss said, sponsors are everywhere. Just grab one at random. Let's get to work. The latest order is to restore a modified car back to its original state. Sure enough, after all the tinkering and modifications, you still end up going back to the original factory. The junkyard is a treasure vault for car guys. Let's see who finds it first and who gets to clock out first. As soon as everyone makes the bet, they immediately scatter to search. Instead, Sinjen starts chatting with the junkyard boss about the old days. Back then, whenever Sinjen came here to scavenge parts, he would stay the whole day. Now he's finally settled down, and the boss is genuinely happy for him. He even goes out of his way to praise Sinjen fiercely in front of everyone. Jake changes to another number and calls his wife. But his wife tells him, if you've got that kind of time, you might as well go buy some underwear. Picking up from last time, the plant has so many paths it's like a maze. Familiar with the place, Sinjen heads straight for the innermost area. A strange number pops up on his phone screen. Sinjen thinks it's Gulen and answers it without thinking. Turns out, it's Jake. Looks like that's not the call you were hoping for. What are you doing? What else could I be doing? Working, obviously. Digging through the junkyard for cheap parts. Sinjen shoots back at Jake. Aren't you working? Jake says he's drinking coffee and looking at flowers. Since he's that free, he might as well go buy underwear. Feeling a draft down his crotch, Jake instinctively reaches down to touch it. Just then, everyone else gradually finds the parts they need. Sinjen wins the lottery and draws the duty shift, which makes him laugh in exasperation, and he curses at Jake. It's all your fault for chatting with me and making me fall behind on work. I really hit the jackpot today. Overtime. Call me after work. I'll come find you. Sinjen doesn't reply to the message, but he can't hide the smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Sinjen returned to the repair shop and found that the door wasn't locked. The toolbox was not in its original place either. A strange sound came from behind him. It wasn't the familiar sound of leather shoes. Sinjen grabbed a wrench on instinct to shield himself first. But in the next second, he was suddenly pulled into a tight hug by someone. A fragile person who clung to him and refused to let go, as if trying to squeeze a bit of comfort out of him. Brother Sinjen, I missed you. Yet Sinjen couldn't figure out how he could be here. Gulen had no idea how serious this matter was. Gulen, who had been waiting since early morning, wore a wounded expression on his face. Waiting from morning until now, this way, Jake might already know that Gulen was at his place. If he let Gulen run around recklessly, even Jake would be dragged into danger. Gulen asked where he had gone and why he was only coming back now. Sinjen answered him in a low voice while hurriedly trying to move him to another place. At this moment, Gulen finally couldn't endure the pain in his leg and mumbled vaguely, "My leg really hurts, G." Sinjen was so anxious that his temper flared up and he almost started scolding him. But he still reached out and helped Gulen into the car. Fortunately, he didn't have a fever. Before getting in the car, he turned his head to the side and glanced at the car next to them. On the way, Sinjen bought some food for Gulen. He asked if the injury on Gulen's leg was Jake's doing, but Gulin said it was Rozu. Rozu and his partners made a deal with Cai, but things went south halfway through, so Rozu wanted to kill him to silence him. Gulin was furious with regret. He'd clearly killed every single member, so how did they still get found out? Sinjen asked him why he had to kill the other members as well, but Gulin said that if he really got caught, he'd never see his brother again, so that's why he did it. Sinjen was so exasperated by him that he actually laughed. And now, great, Cai and Rozu are both hunting Gulin down. The moment Gulin thought about how Sinjen had always stayed by Jake's side, Gulin couldn't help forcing the question out of him. What exactly is their relationship? Can't you even guess that, kid? Jake is your brother-in-law. Sinjen didn't want to listen to him raving anymore and simply told him to sit still in the car. He got out of the car himself to go get the money. He lowered his head and counted that pitiful bit of savings. He gritted his teeth and split off half, stuffing more into Gulin's hands. Gulin panicked and froze. Why are you giving me money? I don't need money. Holding down his emotions, Sinjen laid out the situation for him. If you want to live, leave this city right now and stop being stupid. The moment Gulin heard that, he broke down completely. He had no confidence in surviving on his own at all. Sinjen finally couldn't hold back and cursed out loud. Didn't you bring all of this on yourself? A pair of empty eyes slowly turned toward him. In that instant, Sinjen saw the thing he feared most. He remembered what his adoptive father looked like after taking drugs, and those memories surged up all at once. He yanked open Gulin's clothes, and in the next second, the dense scratch marks crashed into his sight. In the end, you still didn't escape. Have you walked down their path after all? He knew that what Sinjen hated most was drugs. Gulin, flustered, scrambled for excuses, practically begging, "Bro, forgive me. Without you, I can't go on living alone. I swear I'll definitely quit. I definitely will. Just don't abandon me. Aren't we family? Didn't you say you would take me away? I'm begging you, brother Sinjen. Don't leave me." Sinjen let his arms drop weakly. How on earth was he supposed to choose? On the silent highway, Gulin, however, naively thought that this time Sinjen was finally willing to take him along. He even started to dream. His brother would go somewhere else and find a job fixing cars. If he really couldn't find one, they could sleep on the streets together. Zhongjun's face was full of impatience. He could only step hard on the gas and speed aimlessly forward along the highway. Gulin said in a low voice, "Just now, bro didn't eat anything." He suggested they go to a restaurant first before leaving, raising his hand to point not far ahead. "Let's go there. How about it?" Sinjen nodded in agreement. As soon as the car came to a stop, however, his hands gripped the steering wheel even tighter. Tell Gulin the truth. Say out loud that sentence in your heart. Just like how, up to now, you've dodged crisis after crisis. No matter what you face in the future, you'll be able to get through it too. Everyone has made the choice they believe is best for themselves. No matter how many things have happened, we've all survived. So my choice now is not to help you. Sinjen clenched his teeth, looking at Gulin, who was crying uncontrollably and kneeling as he begged him. He would rather see Gulin die in a foreign land than watch with his own eyes as Gulin was killed by the gang right in front of him. When I was a kid, I never kept my promises, and it's the same now. I still can't do it. As Gulin begged him again and again, Sinjin's hand still gripped the gear stick tightly and did not let go. This was his answer. Zong raised his wife's face in a domineering way and said that he was his reality. Jake and Benil ran into each other at the restaurant. Benil told Jake that, in this deal with Rozu, they also lost quite a bit of money. And those corrupt cops. Jake advised him to pull back for now and not keep going. Benil asked Jake if something had happened to Rozu and why he hadn't shown up at all lately. Jake took a swig of alcohol, his tone very cold. That guy's enemies are more than just two. Benil brought up Gulin again. He already knew that it was Jake who saved that kid. Jake, however, said calmly, "Doing this is beneficial to the organization." Benil shook the knife in his hand and said that lately he really couldn't see through what Jake was thinking. Though, to be fair, he'd never seen through him before. Jake talked at length about how there are people plotting ahead of you and others waiting behind you to close the net. Then Jake took out his phone and glanced at Sinjin's location. He said in a low voice that he should head back. When Sinjin got home, she found that the door lock looked like it had been tampered with. As soon as she walked in, she said, "You've actually learned to use the front door. No need to give the key back to me." Jake casually asked if she had seen Gulin, because Jake had originally thought that Gulin would cling to Sinjin so tightly that she wouldn't be able to shake him off. Sinjin smiled and said, "You think I was so busy kicking someone out that I didn't even make a phone call?" Jake said, "I just thought you didn't want to be disturbed." Step by step, Sinjen walked straight toward Jake. Ever since she saw Gulen's eyes hollowed out from drug use, I knew then that he was no longer the Gulen he used to be. He had seen this kind of state more than enough, ever since he was a child. He let out a heavy sigh. He had always thought he was carefree, living in the moment and doing just fine. But maybe the one trapped in the past is actually me. To completely let go of Gulen is really too hard for me. Jake gently put his arm around her and comforted her, saying, "You're not trapped in the past. It's just that your situation has changed, and you've finally seen that clearly. Most people can only see the reality they want to see." Jake had Sinjen fix her gaze on him. He said very seriously, "I am your reality." Sinjen wavered a little after hearing that, and lifted his hand to trace from the corner of Jake's mouth all the way to his earlobe. Then he wrapped his arm around Jake's neck and kissed him directly. Yes, he saw it very clearly. Jake followed his lead and responded, kissing him even more deeply. Only then did Sinjen come to his senses and realize that he really did have a man of his own now. Rozu was furious and immediately canceled the orders with the repair shop. The repair shop suddenly lost quite a few wealthy clients, and the boss lay over the desk, shaking with sobs. As soon as Sinjen walked in, he saw the boss wailing, and he was completely confused. Kion explained the whole chain of events to Sinjen. Sinjen immediately understood that this was Rozu's revenge on him. The little freckled guy suggested handing out super flyers, and the boss said helplessly, "You used to say those were trash, but given how things are now, maybe that trash is exactly what could save us." Seeing the teasing looks on his co-workers' faces, Sinjen still decided to go look for Rozu again. The bar was a complete mess, and there was even a suspicious pool of blood on the floor. "You got into a fight here?" Rozu looked crazier and more off than last time. "You people who fix cars have no understanding of our world at all." He moved his hand a little and curled his finger, motioning for Sinjen to come closer. Sinjen directly asked him about the repair shop's orders being canceled one after another. Rozu gave a scornful laugh. "Just a few cars, nothing worth mentioning. If you people really had any skills, customers would have been lining up long ago. Right? How do you even run your business usually?" Sinjen told him to stop making snide remarks, stared hard at him, and asked what he was really after by doing all this. Rozu set his glass down with a sharp clack. He turned around and pinned Sinjen beneath him, murmuring, "What if I say it's because of you? Are you going to come clean up the mess again this time?" As he spoke, he grabbed Sinjen's ass. The tip of his tongue slid over the spot with the medicated patch, his voice brushing his ear. "Every time I see you, there's something stuck on your neck. Was I the one who did this to you on purpose?" Sinjen shot back with a cold laugh, saying that besides himself, he didn't have a single person he was truly close to. Rozu didn't get angry. He only said that Sinjen could use whatever method he wanted, as long as it could win him back. Sinjen backed away as he spoke. "Unfortunately, it's a little too late now. Listen carefully. Don't you dare mess with the repair shop." In Rozu's eyes, Sinjen's refusal was just him stringing him along on purpose. His temper flared, and he slammed Sinjen down against the bar counter. "If you want to save that repair shop, then you'd better change your tone when you speak first." Rozu simply wouldn't listen to reason, and Sinjen had no choice. Under that suffocating pressure, he could only lower his head and let out a short, mocking laugh. "There really are a whole bunch of people who want me to fix my bad habits." Just then, the assistant rushed in to report, but Rozu was furious and had no intention of listening. But the matter was too urgent, so the assistant had no choice but to grit his teeth and say, "The counselor is going to withdraw the investment." Only then did Sinjen realize that the government counselor had been laundering money. The assistant urged him to go over and take a look first. He could also see clearly that Rozu genuinely cared a lot about Sinjen. Sinjen once again spoke in an extremely affectionate way. Jake almost wanted to slip into driving mode right then and there, but the circumstances didn't allow it, so he might as well take his time and enjoy this view. Then the plot continues. After he left Rozu, he immediately called Jake, but at that moment Jake was on a call with Kaisaru. Kaisaru said that Rozu was now stuck in the middle and in a very difficult position, and all the clients Rozu had referred had canceled their orders. The boss didn't say anything on the surface, but Sinjen would definitely take all of this as his own fault. So Sinjen would definitely work even harder to make up for it, and Jake only replied with one sentence. "I know." At that moment, the phone beside him suddenly lit up. It was a message from Sinjen, asking him to call back. Jake didn't waste words either. He just drove over and picked Sinjen up in his own car. With one glance, Sinjen noticed that Jake wasn't wearing the same clothes he had on that morning, and his heart sank. He said he had nowhere to go, so that really was a lie. Jake said he went to buy underwear, and ended up casually buying a few more pieces of clothing. He quickly shifted the topic and asked Sinjen, What was that trash you just left in the car? A flyer from a repair shop? So you really did go to see Rozu? Sinjen gave a faint smile. You do know me pretty well. Jake warned him once again. Keep your lower half under control for me. Sinjen held down that wandering hand and asked in return, are you sure Rozu doesn't know what our relationship is? It's fine if he finds out anyway. There's no downside. Jake recalled the name he'd just heard over at Rozu's place. A name even someone like him, who never paid attention to politics, had heard before. That alone was enough to show how powerful the other man was. His name was Konio. The corner of Jake's mouth lifted. Didn't expect there'd be an extra bonus. He turned his wrist over, click, click, and their two hands naturally locked together. But Sinjen still didn't know Jake's true identity. Seeing how calm Jake was only made him even more uneasy. Yet Jake just fixed his eyes on him and asked, are you worried about me? Sinjen shot back at once. I'm not so idle that I'd worry about a lunatic who puts bullets into people's bodies whenever he's provoked. But his words were full of concern. If you ever get tired of the underworld life, come to me immediately, Jake asked with a smile. And what could you do? Looking at him, Sinjen answered in all seriousness. No matter what, he would never let the mob or the police take Jake away. Besides, I'm a great driver. If we really have to run for our lives, wouldn't you need a good wheelman? No matter when, two people are always better than one. This utterly unfeigned sincerity from Sinjen instantly ignited Jake's desire. Right now, he just wanted to see that enchanting view. Sinjen couldn't understand his kink, but he did as he was told anyway. Jake stared, entranced at this view, never getting tired of it no matter how long he looked. The next second, he slammed the gas pedal and drove straight toward the repair shop. As soon as the car stopped, the screen tilted into an ambiguous curve. We'll continue in the next episode. It was really too sweet. They had just confessed this chapter, and in the blink of an eye, they were in a luxury car. The moment the car was parked, the two of them moved into action right away. Sinjen felt sorry for the seat underneath them, but Jake only said, if it gets dirty, just wipe it. If you think it's an eyesore, then replace it. It's yours anyway, you decide. The very next second, he scooped the other directly into his arms. Sinjen smiled dotingly, seeing right through how impatient Jake was. Jake buried his face into Sinjen's neck, fiercely drawing in his scent, and even wanted Sinjen to take off his jacket too. Only I'm stripping? Sinjen forced down his breath. The car's too cramped. I can't even move. Sinjen really had no way to deal with him. He kept touching Jake, his expression still relatively composed, but that certain someone was anything but normal. The space in the car was too cramped. Sinjen was pinned down and basically couldn't move. Jake could only shield his head, but his movements below grew even rougher, and the thudding against the car's underbody jolted Sinjen at once. Sinjen ached so much for it that he started wondering if the chassis frame would end up damaged. Jake simply used his actions to forcibly cut off his train of thought. The narrow car limited Jake's performance, but the mood was too good. Neither of them could bear to stop. Sinjen could only take the initiative a bit more to soothe this clearly off-kilter Jake. Sinjen could only take the initiative a bit more. Jake looked so pitiful like this. Whatever he wanted, Sinjen would give him. Suddenly, Sinjen bumped into the steering wheel, his whole body seeming to sit down on it. For a moment, he couldn't tell whether he was dealing with Jake or wrestling with the car. The two of them started bickering again halfway through, and Sinjen told Jake to shut up and focus. This time Jake got serious. He directly told Sinjen to drive. Sinjen put both feet on the steering wheel, but the seat was too hard, not comfortable to sit in at all. Jake just had a weakness for this ruthless streak of Sinjen's. Sinjen hadn't expected that Jake was still hung up on what he'd said just now. He was thinking, no matter how free one person is, it'll never be as brilliant as two people together. Jake asked him what it felt like to personally drive a luxury car. While wiping the steering wheel, Sinjen said, not just any car counts as a luxury car, but this one is definitely worth the price. I really like it, though I don't know whether you like the car more or the person more. After fooling around enough, the two of them made it home before dawn. Usually so impeccably dressed, Jake walked in the door and immediately got completely naked. It was really an eyesore. Exhausted, Sinjen lay on his side and quietly told Jake to take care of his gunshot scar, then drifted into a deep sleep. Jake looked at this arrogant wife. With just a casual sentence, he could toss Jake's heart into utter chaos. That sentence, willing to run away with him, and won't let him get caught, landed like a punch, shattering Jake completely. He had never imagined anyone would go that far, and even less imagined that person would be you. But if you knew my true identity, would you still do this? Still, even if you regret it later, it'll already be too late. I will never let go. With that in mind, Jake turned over and went to sleep as well. From the very beginning, Jake had his eye on Sinjen. That's why he tried every possible way to keep Sinjen by his side. The biker gang boss, Mateo, heard that Jake had come to collect a debt. Back then, the one Jake saved was the only child Mateo's older brother had left behind. Mateo owed Jake a favor, and all Jake wanted was for Mateo and Rosu to make a deal. Mateo still wanted to press him. Why? Jake said, if you want, I can give you a reason. Mateo sighed, your way of shutting people up is still the same as ever. Mateo agreed to let Jake and Rosu work together and said he would contact his repair shops. That flyer felt a bit off. Through Kaisaru's camera, Jake watched that stubborn, bull-headed back. Even if he was being treated like a scammer, he still did his best to pitch the deal. Jake instructed Kaisaru to keep a close eye on the surroundings. Just as he was about to hang up, Sinjen suddenly leaned in from the side and asked what he was watching. Even Jake's hand paused, and amid a flurry of confused sounds, the feed cut off abruptly. Kaisaru replied casually, looking at the nearby map, and the halted Jake should also start working. Ijumil couldn't help sighing that Jake calculated every step too precisely. Back then he had thought Jake was soft-hearted for not touching that kid. Turns out he had saved him on purpose. Jake cut off his sentiment directly. It was just in case. When that day really comes, it won't be too late to deal with it then. Not long ago, the Mercy organization had internal strife, and Jake took the opportunity to rise to the top, preparing to make his first big deal. He found a driver who seemed pretty decent, so that the higher UPS wouldn't have to worry. Yet Ijumil was still uneasy. At that time, danger and the unknown were everywhere. He couldn't figure out why Jake had to drag an ordinary person into this. Jake wouldn't let him overthink it and asked directly, where is Sinjen? Ijumil had no choice but to give Sinjen's location. Infiltrating the drug dealer's turf was like breaking into the deepest part of the jungle. Lawless, liable to go insane at any moment. They had their own rules too. Not touching people from other organizations was the bottom line. So Jake took Sinjen under his own command. If anyone provoked him, that meant they were challenging him personally, and of course he would use violence to settle the problem. So if you wanted to wipe out those order-disrupting organizations, there was no faster or more direct method than this. Ijumil sighed, if that person becomes your weak spot, then it's dangerous. By then, I'll have to prepare your funeral for you. Back then, Jake said bluntly, that kind of thing is never going to happen. I'll personally get rid of it anyway. For a moment, Ijumil forgot just how ruthless Jake really was. Everything was progressing according to Jake's plan, but the number of times Jake contacted Sinjen was actually increasing. Over and over, he reminded him, no matter when, no matter where, always be careful of eavesdroppers. Jake understood all of this, yet he still wanted to contact Sinjen. Despite looking strong and burly, Jake is actually very petty. He also gets jealous especially easily. Today their boss let the two of them get off work early. Just then, the thirsty Kaisaru suggested going for a drink, his treat. Kaisaru, half offhand and half serious, comforted him. Don't take the whole Rosu thing to heart. Situations like this weren't unfamiliar to Sinjen. In fact, at first, Kaisaru had thought Sinjen was just some street punk. He hadn't expected much from him, but Sinjen actually managed to hand out all the flyers. So now Kaisaru was seeing Sinjen in a new light, and the two of them even traded a few playful jabs. As they chatted, they started bringing up Jake now and then. Sinjen felt that the relationship between Kaisaru and Jake really didn't seem very good. Kaisaru felt that Jake always had an unlucky-looking face, and he had no idea what was going through his head every day. Sinjen very much agreed with that assessment. As soon as a car was mentioned, Sinjen couldn't help but think of that night scene. Looks like I've also started secretly enjoying this relationship. Just then, the phone suddenly rang, cutting their conversation short. Kaisaru thought it was Jake and casually made a snarky comment. But when Sinjen stared at the word Gulen on the screen, he completely froze. On the one hand, he wanted to cut ties with Gulen completely. On the other hand, he was afraid it really was Gulen calling. Had something happened to Gulen? Kaisaru also saw his expression darken and quietly asked, "You're not going to answer it?" Ironically, this very reminder made the lieutenant general hang up the phone and shove it straight back into his trouser pocket. He smiled and joked, "Too bad it's not Jake. Too bad what? Actually, it's a blessing." But even as he gripped the beer bottle, the lieutenant general still couldn't let go of Gulen. That pitiful expression stayed stuck before his eyes and just wouldn't fade. In the end, the lieutenant general still stood up, planning to go out and return the call. But just then, Jake appeared behind him. Jake directly took the beer bottle from his hand. "You can get drunk on just this little bit of beer?" The very next second, he started jealously rambling. "What's so important that it has to be just the two of you? Sitting alone in a bar, drinking and talking?" Kaisaru was utterly disgusted. What bad luck. The devil actually came in person. Jake naturally slipped an arm around the lieutenant general. After struggling for so long between Gulen and Jake, the lieutenant general still chose Jake. After all, the one who decided to be with this guy is me. The lieutenant general cut them off and asked Jake, "What did you come to find me for exactly?" Jake said he was taking him somewhere, to the supermarket to buy special supplies. The two of them just wandered around the supermarket like that, bought everything they needed, and brought it back, like an ordinary couple, unbearably sweet. But on the other side, Gulen could only hide under a filthy, chaotic overpass. Staring at that unanswered call, he was on the verge of a mental breakdown. Back then, he clearly said he would take me away, but in the end, he went back on his word. We finally reunited with such difficulty, and now he's abandoned me again. In order to get back to his side, I've been desperately struggling all this time. How can he be so ruthless? If Big Bro really doesn't want me anymore, what am I supposed to do? Over here, Nakamoto even thought that Jake brought me over to do something big. Who would have thought it was just a stroll around a supermarket? The moment we walked in, looking like this, we directly scared the nearby kids so much they didn't dare come close. We walk one round looking all pleased, and Shinjian's ineffective smile, going around in circles, directly scares a kid into bursting into tears. I turned back, wanting to teach the secret smiling technique to Jake, but he treated me like air. Jake casually grabbed a bottle from the shelf and tossed it straight into the shopping cart. Sinjen reminded him that the one left at home is a cream. Jake said this one works even better than hand cream. Watching Jake pack things in like he was stocking up wholesale, I still couldn't help but interrupt him. "How many are you going to take? Rather than not having enough, it's better to buy more so you can feel at ease even with leftovers." Sinjen turned his head to look at the candy on the shelf. Jake noticed and said with dislike that the quality of this kind of supermarket stuff isn't good. Sinjen looked speechless. Did I ever say I wanted to buy it? I simply reached out and took a family-size bottle of lotion, cheap and big. It feels like a single bottle could press down all the trouble. Looking at Jake again, he's going for the refined route. He picks by sections from head to toe, completely different in style from Shinjian. Two people whose preferences and personalities are totally different are actually here together picking out household supplies. Only at this moment did Sinjen start to feel a bit dazed, only now realizing it. Could it be that it's already too late? Jake joked with a laugh. What? Sinjen wants to be like me and stay with someone who does nothing all day but fix cars? Jake really couldn't figure it out. What was so great about cars that made Sinjen so obsessed? But Sinjen thoroughly enjoyed it. Under his maintenance and effort, the machines ran smoothly and steadily. Jake felt that it was just a machine, right? Yet Sinjen insisted on treating it as if it were a person. Compared to people, Sinjen preferred spending time with machines. In this world, there is no such thing as a bad car. But if two guys like you showed up in a supermarket, wouldn't that be a movie shoot or something? Everyone would probably think it was a terrorist attack. A couple goes shopping at the supermarket, buying daily necessities. As soon as they get home, they start using them right away. Jake stood in front of the slipper rack carefully picking out slippers, and Sinjen said, "My place isn't that dirty, is it? Or does Jake have a cleanliness obsession?" In fact, this was just Jake's habit. Shinjian couldn't help feeling curious. How could someone who cares so much about these things be so reckless with me? Jake lowered his voice and said, "You're the exception. Then should I be shedding tears over this special treatment for the assistant? Someone who doesn't even cry in bed is going to cry now. I'll only cry when it's really time to cry. Don't hold back anymore. I'll just enjoy it." Their overly explicit conversation drew a sideways glare from an older woman nearby. A pair of slippers fell out of the shopping cart, and the conversation that followed became even more suggestive. "If you start crying first, I'll at least pretend a little." As Sinjen said this, he reached his hand out toward Jake. "I'll put on an act," he said, directly reaching out to touch Jake. But Jake grabbed him at once. "If it's about crying, I already used the thing down there enough, don't I?" Sinjen simply couldn't communicate with him, but Jake felt that Fukami had talked too much, too sweetly today, and looked completely weighed down with worries. It was hard to pretend he didn't see it. He clearly had something on his mind, but it wasn't something that could be exposed in front of the two of them. So Fukami only said, "It's nothing. There's nothing at all." Jake stared at those slippers and said quietly, "Nothing is allowed to go wrong, just like our relationship." The slipper problem was solved, but the bed problem still wasn't. The scattered clothes and hand cream spelled out, "Something has already happened," in unmistakable detail. Fukami was so exhausted he couldn't hold on and soon fell asleep. Jake reached out and gently stroked the sleeping man. The emotion in his eyes was too deep for anyone to read. His big hand rested on Sinjin's waist, as if savoring what he had just done. In the night, The phone's vibration sounded especially jarring. Jake took his time, putting on his clothes one piece at a time. He ignored the scattered items on the floor and walked straight out. Before leaving, he even turned back to check whether the person on the bed had woken up. When Sinjen was repairing cars, Jake would pop into his mind. He clearly missed him a lot, didn't he? Ever since the auto repair shop lost Rozu as a major client, business had plunged straight to the bottom. Now they could only rummage for parts in the scrapyard, barely hanging on. Everyone knew very well the boss had never been able to let go of Rozu. Kaisaru joked fearlessly, "Boss, do you have some other thoughts about Rozu?" The boss shuddered in fear. "Don't talk nonsense. A client like Rozu is like winning the lottery for us. What's wrong with me thinking about it?" It really was like winning the lottery, and everyone nodded along. Sinjen saw all of this. After all, very few people could casually dump a huge sum of money into modifying a car like Rozu. The bearded man patted him. "Build up more connections, and you'll eventually run into wealthy clients." But in Sinjin's mind, Jake's figure suddenly flashed by. Kaisaru said to the boss, "If you don't want to go to the scrapyard and dig around, then stop dawdling. When are you ever going to grow up?" The boss felt even more wronged. "Is there really no one on my side?" "Yes, there really was no one on your side." The bearded man told him to stop fooling around and go back to the proper work. As they joked, the scrapyard owner walked over, wondering aloud how this usually lively crowd all seemed off today. The boss let out a long sigh. The repair shop's future was pitch black, and even their working cash flow was about to run dry. With his eyes lowered, Sinjen said they couldn't just keep waiting like this. They wanted to build a car. They would strip down a scrapped car and piece it back together. But the number of parts they needed was huge, and everyone was here today to scavenge for those parts. The old man patted his chest as soon as he heard it. "Leave the parts to me, I'll go ask around." They would definitely be able to find the parts. Only then did everyone finally show a bit of a smile. That night, Sinjen buried himself in repairing the car alone. The shortage of components frighteningly large. Just this one junkyard isn't enough. He's figuring out who to send elsewhere to keep searching. But Jake's face pops into his head again, out of his control. Yet the moment he pictures Jake covered in grease, he feels that guy is totally out of place here. Right then, a call from an unknown number suddenly rings. Sinjen mutters under his breath, "No need to look. I already know it's Jake. Just how many numbers does he have?" But as soon as he picks up, the other side asks, "May I ask if you are Gulen's guardian?" Think of him and he appears. Really does feel like some kind of unspoken connection. Last time we mentioned Sinjen going to the rehab center to see Gulen, the two of them were completely at odds in their thinking. Sinjen didn't want to watch Gulen keep sinking, so he warned him, "If you can't quit, then don't contact me again." Gulen begged through tears, "I've already quit, bro." Seeing that he was still so obstinate, Sinjin's fists clenched. He almost wanted to beat him awake, but he didn't want to look like a madman in front of everyone. So once again he warned himself, "This is the last time I put up with this." This sentence made Gulen remember what Jake said when he saved him last time. "This is the last time I let you off the hook. What happens after that all depends on what you choose." In the end, Sinjen stood up and left, and all Gulen could do was watch him walk away. Once he stepped out the door, Sinjen suddenly recalled something Jake had said before. When a person is pushed to the brink, it's easy for them to do something extreme. Keep people like that close. Maybe someday you'll be betrayed by the people closest to you, so you might as well trust the one who takes you for a sucker. Sinjen hadn't had time to figure out what that sentence really meant. Jake appeared beside him. Jake had long said that Gulen was just a walking trouble magnet. Sinjen turned around and asked him, "Was it you who deliberately left clues so I'd see what Gulen is like now?" Jake's tone was very flat. "Aren't I just going along with what you wanted? How come you're still not grateful?" Sinjen sighed. "If you keep going along with me like this, I'm going to have hypertension sooner or later." Still, Gulen really did catch Jake off guard. He actually asked Sinjen to come to the rehab facility. But Gulen still had no energy. Jake said he always acted like it doesn't matter even if I die. But when it really came time to die, he'd be so scared he'd want to run. Sinjen had to admit that maybe he had spent his whole life longing for the warmth of family. Jake raised his hand and ruffled his hair. "I gave him a chance to run, but the kid didn't go." Sinjen told Jake to behave himself and not get riddled with bullets like before. But Jake said, "Everything depends on your choice." All Sinjen could say was, "I'll try my best not to drag you down." On the other side, the deal between Mateo and Rozu ended smoothly. The $4 million was handled via Royal Road. For just this bit of money, Rozu was willing to bite the hook. Looks like he really is desperate. They plan to make their move during the second deal, raid that batch of weapons, and pry the channel out of Benil. The deputy director is afraid that Benil will defect at the last minute, But Jake speaks with complete certainty. I've spent so much effort on him. He won't let us down. The slanting morning sunlight shines into the apartment, stretching the air bright and clear. Jake spreads open the newspaper as always, his movements steady as a clock. This was a new habit that Sinjen only discovered after they started living together. What does it say? Sinjen leans in, his gaze falling on the horoscope column in the corner of the paper. Jake's long fingers tap the page. August 5th, Leo, hold your ground. That's right. Then stay home obediently tonight. Sinjen replies offhandedly. I'm talking about you. Jake doesn't even lift his head, his fingertips slowly rubbing the rim of the coffee cup. Only then does Sinjen suddenly realize, his heart giving a jolt. This man seems to see right through him, yet he's still startled by it. Even after being called out, Jake stays unruffled, calmly sipping his coffee. Sinjen simply changes the subject. How long are you planning to freeload at my place? I'm afraid you'll slip away the moment I'm not looking. I have to keep an eye on you. Sinjen only feels like he's talking nonsense. After all, someone was still sneaking out in the small hours last night. There's no way it was just to buy a newspaper. But nothing shows on Sinjen's face. He only says mildly, if you want to stay long-term, pay rent first. When it comes to money, you sure start calculating everything with perfect clarity. Only when the accounts are settled clearly can one feel at ease, so that old scores won't be dredged up later. Jake suddenly turned his head to stare at him, his gaze very heavy. Does this count as our second contract? Sinjen followed the motion and raised his hand, the pad of his finger lightly brushing over Jake's sharp-edged face. His tone was gentle, yet hid a sharp edge. Don't worry, I won't be as cold-blooded as a certain someone, so you don't need to be afraid. At this moment, Gulen was staring at the words, love and redemption, above the podium, while the teacher's voice kept repeating them beside his ear with a tone of compassion. Great love can sever all the chains of suffering. Gulen clenched the scabbed needle marks hidden under his sleeve, his Adam's apple bobbing as he forcibly swallowed down that rush of bitterness. After the event dispersed, Gulen had just stepped out of the classroom when someone blocked his path. The other person opened their palm and pushed over 3 capsules. Take these, and you will never again crave that filthy stuff. Gulen refused from the very beginning. He had given his word to his brother, but under that person's coaxing, those nights of vomiting again and again in the rehab center suddenly flashed before his eyes. In order to get out sooner and see his brother, Gulen still took the pills. Jake's new look is just too thrilling. In the abandoned scrapyard on the outskirts of the city, the clanging of wrenches and the collision of metal sounded again and again. The workers had even scoured secondhand trading sites, but they just couldn't find the parts they needed. Brown's North plant might have stock. The scrapyard boss lowered his voice. There, the gangs are constantly at war, and all the gold bars are hidden in the scrapped cars. Ah, the gold bars are all hidden in the scrapped cars. Even the factory owner doesn't dare go near. Take my advice, don't go there to die. Sinjen nodded repeatedly, rustle, rustle. Yet a trace of determination flashed across his eyes. Tapta, when night fell, he drove alone toward that dangerous place. Jake carefully dressed himself up to look like a street thug. Black-rimmed glasses pressed down that sharp gaze, while the studs on his ear and lip glinted coldly in the dark. The tattoo on his neck flickered in and out of sight with his movements. This deal with Rosu Mateo would be the key blow to crush the Makesifu group. That guy, and he thinks he's worthy of catching Benil's eye? The little thug let out a loud laugh, pressing the muzzle of his gun directly against Jake's forehead. Remember this. If you don't risk your life working, your life ends here. Jake lowered his eyes, hiding the cold gleam in them, a mysterious smile hooking at his lips in the shadows. The storm is coming. In the junkyard, the stench of rust mixed with the acrid smell of motor oil. Sinjen stepped over the shattered glass all over the ground, threading his way among heaps of metal wreckage. His fingertips slid across the dented door of a pickup. The chill that came from the metal surface made his heartbeat instantly quicken. This really was the treasure every modder dreams of. Looking at a whole row of the same model, his eyes lit up. The flash of his phone kept popping, click, as the lens swept over these parts. He could already imagine his co-workers' delight when they saw the photos. Sinjen couldn't hold back and laughed out loud, completely ignoring the danger that could erupt from the darkness at any moment. He thought, at worst, I'll just freeload a meal. No way anyone's insane enough to keep fighting 24/7. The moment he sent the message into the group, the boss called right away. You're crazy? Didn't I tell you not to go to that yard? Come back now. Stop looking. No, there are still a lot of parts here. You really found something good? I'll come over right away and take the parts. Sinjen crouched down to inspect the chassis of a car, not caring when oil smeared onto his coveralls. Tomorrow morning we'll come as a team to tow it. This four-wheel drive system is absolutely perfect. While calming his boss, who was about to explode, he waited until the other side repeatedly confirmed it was safe before hanging up. Sinjen had come to the junkyard to look for parts, but unexpectedly ran into Rozu. Just after he hung up on his boss, the screen suddenly lit up with a new message. It was a voice message from Gulen, his hoarse voice filled with electronic static. Back when Jake saved him, there were also police officers at Jake's side. He couldn't quite make sense of it, only remembering that Jake seemed to be doing something together with the police. Sinjen suddenly froze, memories surging up like a rising tide. When he pressed Jake about Gulen's whereabouts, Jake had clearly said that he'd been taken by Mixifo. But if things were really as Jake said, that Gulen had been seized and taken back by Mixifo, then there was no way he could have changed into a police uniform in that situation. The image of Jake in a police uniform kept flashing again and again in Sinjin's mind. The enforcer who broke into the apartment the first time they met, and the smell of gunpowder on him when he disappeared in the middle of the night and came back later. Gulen's warning still echoed in his ears. Don't trust him, because he's Mafia. At first, I also thought that joining the Mafia could turn my rotten life around, but you must never think that way. As long as you hang around with Jake, you'll never be able to get out. Sinjin's thumb unconsciously rubs along the edge of his phone, as if he can't hear Gulen's voice at all, sunk in his own thoughts. This man who always appears at critical moments understands Sinjin's weak spots and desires even better than Sinjin himself. But that gentle teasing and that protection in dangerous times, are they genuine or calculated? And is there even the slightest bit of truth in what Sinjin thinks he knows about Jake? Sinjin seems to hear a familiar voice. It is clearly Rozu, right there under the moonlight. Both sides of the deal are arguing furiously over the price. The clash of metal mingles with curses, echoing back and forth among the rusted car shells. Jake quietly feels for his phone in his jacket pocket, the loading circle on the screen slowly spinning. Because of the signal, the connection is painfully slow. A busted tire rolls and wobbles to a stop at Sinjin's feet. Sorry, wrong place, you guys, carry on. Sinjin raises both hands, forcing himself to appear calm, not moving a single step. He never imagined he would run into Rozu here. Even more unexpected was that Jake was here too. The moment Rozu brushes against Sinjin, Jake's fist clenches so tight it could crush bone. Couldn't make it at the repair shop and ran here to pick through trash. Isn't all of that your fault? Rozu slung an arm around his shoulder and said lightly, if you'd followed me earlier, you wouldn't have to suffer like this. With you working this hard, how could I possibly not be moved? Jake's brows sank, cold as a blade. Anyone who dares touch Sinjin is asking to die. The next second, Rozu forcibly turned Sinjin around and introduced him like nothing was wrong. This is my personal repairman. Sinjin abruptly slapped that hand away. Don't drag unrelated people into this. Wait. Someone in the crowd suddenly shouted, isn't that Jake's little lackey? Grab him. I want to see what tricks he thinks he can still pull. At the critical moment, Jake kicked Sinjin in the spot between his hip and thigh. Using the momentum, he yanked the man in front of him, and the thug took one look and instantly exploded. You dare ruin the boss's plan too? Trash like you thinks you're fit to be in the Mafia? Right after that, the thug kicked Sinjin in the face once, then followed up with 6 more kicks, all to his face. Rozu grabbed Sinjin by his blood-stained collar, the darkness in his eyes turning heavy. Didn't you say you didn't know Jake? Are you lying to me? Off to the side, Jake's nails dug in so hard they turned white. Sinjin spat out a mouthful of bloody saliva, a smile still hanging on his lips. Whether he's called Jake or Jerry, what's that got to do with me? The black car gang started to suspect that Rozu had been sent by Maxiver from the very beginning. Rozu sneered, I know, whenever something goes wrong you people just dump the blame on someone else. That's your habit. But you still have to look at who you're pinning it on. Haha, that expression on your face. Did I hit the nail on the head? Haha. Just the fact that you came out alone to make the deal from the start is already very suspicious. Besides, there's no way Maxifer would just sit back and ignore this. The black car gang's boss waved his hand. What deal is there left to talk about? In a situation like this, how do you expect us to trust you? In the shadows, Jake's thumb was unconsciously rubbing the grip of his gun. He swept his gaze around. There was no ambush nearby. Only Rozu and that group from the black car gang were here. Only a dozen or so people. If he made a move, there shouldn't be any problem. Out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at Sinjin not far away, and his heart sank. This guy really is. Every single time he can precisely ruin his plans. At the very instant when the tension froze, Jake suddenly exploded into action. The pitch-black muzzle pressed precisely against the leader's brow. The moment the gunshot exploded, he yanked a nearby punk over and used him as a human shield. Blood splattered onto the concrete, blooming like a bizarre flower. Almost by instinct, Sinjin crashed into Rozu. He shoved too hard. That push was so forceful it nearly wrecked Rozu's arm. His heart jolted, and from his right came a sharp shout. A black car gang member's gun barrel was already pressed against Sinjin's carotid artery. In a daze, he recalled a conversation he'd once had with Jake. "You said, you know what I'm afraid of, right? Because you're a cold-blooded gangster who kills without batting an eye? But the thing I'm afraid of is more personal. What I'm afraid of is that even if I fire a gun and kill someone, I won't feel anything at all." The very instant the trigger was about to be pulled, Jake's bullet pierced through the man's temple. Warm blood splattered onto Sinjin. Not far away, that dying member of the black car gang suddenly sprang up, gun muzzle aimed straight at Sinjin. The chill of metal drew near. His pupils shrank abruptly, almost a conditioned reflex. Sinjin twisted back to snatch the pistol from the man who had just fallen, raised his hand toward the front, and pulled the trigger. Sinjin's finger trembled violently out of control, unable to stop. He could not believe it, he had really fired a gun. A gloved hand suddenly covered his, firmly pressing down on his shaking wrist. He looked up and met those eyes, so deep it was as if they had no bottom. Jake's wrist exerted force bit by bit, the warmth of his palm almost scorching through Sinjin's skin. Under the pressure of that strength, the pistol fell to the ground with a clatter. From behind came Rozu's furious roar. "So you two are in this together? You actually dared to play me?" But Sinjin could no longer hear clearly. Jake was dragging him forward, yet his gaze was locked tightly on their clasped hands. At some point, his own fingers had already tightened, clutching that smoke-scented hand, as if he had grabbed the last life-saving rope. When confronted by Sinjin's questioning, will Jake reveal his true identity? Previously, we left off with Sinjin being pulled by Jake into the car. Sinjin's mind was a complete mess. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out why Jake had suddenly appeared there, and Jake also felt a guilty flutter in his heart. Sinjin, who should have been staying at home, how could he have run to a place like this? The more Sinjin thought about it, the more afraid he became, and the more he thought, the angrier he got, filled with suspicion about Jake's appearance. At this moment, questioning voices kept coming through Luoman's earpiece, but Jake just brushed it off with a few perfunctory words. Sinjin was so angry his whole body tensed up, pressing to the bottom of what was going on. Yet Jake answered completely beside the point, not on the same wavelength at all. Jake sounded relaxed on the surface, but his hands gripping the steering wheel had already betrayed him. In fact, he was also nervous as hell inside. He secretly glanced at the wound on Sinjin's face, slowly telling himself there had been no other way at the time. Sinjin sensed that something was wrong. Jake was disguising his identity on one hand, and on the other hand still ran to the crime scene. Earlier, he had even effortlessly pulled him out of the police station. Every time I wanted to keep investigating, Jake would throw up all kinds of obstacles. Even more outrageous, it was as if Jake could always know my movements in advance, several times directly pinning me down. From the rearview mirror, Jake stared at the suddenly quiet Sinjin. This abnormal silence made his scalp prickle, yet he was still reporting the situation to the outside. But Sinjin seemed to have vaguely guessed something. With a click, the car stopped in front of the motel, and Jake told Sinjin to get out first and leave. He was probably afraid Sinjin would blame himself for firing the gun, so he especially added one more line. "Your bullets didn't hit those people's vital spots. Just like a car, a person doesn't die that easily either. The one who blew their brains out was me." Jake reached out, wanting to hold Sinjin's hand, wanting to coax him out of his pointless self-blame. But Sinjin slapped his hand away and asked coldly, "Who on earth are you? So this is what you care about, not any sense of guilt." The vein on Sinjin's temple throbbed, and his fists clenched so hard they cracked. "Pretending to be a cop isn't enough? Now what kind of trick do you want to play? Does the Mafia do side gigs too? And that call just now, anyone with eyes and ears could tell it wasn't how the underworld operates at all. Are you actually a cop, or if you're neither, then you're a complete thorough fraud?" Jake suddenly turned his face away. "What do you want to hear?" Sinjin's eyes reddened with anger. "Do you know what's funniest of all? When I saw you in the junkyard, I wasn't surprised at all." He curled his lips. There was nothing but mockery in that smile. "I even thought you were doing a drug deal. After all, there's no reason that explains your recklessness better than that. But that's all I know." Jake kept his mouth shut the whole time. Sinjin yanked off his leather gloves and flung them straight onto the dashboard. He grabbed Jake's collar in a death grip and yanked him hard toward himself. "You bastard. Spit it out. What exactly is your true identity?" Man, these two even bring sexual tension into a fight. Blow by blow, they really did end up on the bed. Last time we left off with Sinjin forcing Jake, "What exactly is your true identity?" Jake didn't answer. Instead, he said into the phone, Have the support team come to the scene. At this point, there was no way to turn back. Forget it, keep moving. Sinjin slapped his hand away, made Jake get out of the car, and go with him to the police station. He suddenly realized Jake had been a cop too, so the cops couldn't be trusted either. Then what on earth was he supposed to do? Jake got out of the car and reached out to grab Sinjin by the waistband. Let's go. Stop making trouble, we're home. Jake explained to Sinjin that he was just doing his job. But in my plan, you weren't supposed to be on site. Sinjin shouted in fury. Your plan was to make me think you were just like me, both of us at the very bottom, and then toy with each other? Now you won't even say a single word. You don't seem like any kind of gangster. Who are you really? What's your status? Are you really some bullshit special agent? I originally thought you were dangerous, Sinjin sneered. Now it seems you're nothing special. Jake rested his head against Sinjin's. Then what exactly am I supposed to say? Even if you knew my true identity, nothing would change. Sinjin didn't want to hear any of this. He only remembered Jake had lied to him. I've long known you had secrets. Even if you'd killed 100 people, I wouldn't care. Even if you'd killed 100 people, I'd accept it. I was already prepared to shoulder everything. But you're not even in the mob. From the very beginning, I was completely played by the scam of a bastard like you. You say it's for me, but it's actually for yourself, isn't it? Jake stared into Sinjin's eyes, speaking very slowly. Sinjin was so enraged that he lost control and swung a punch the moment he raised his hand. When he tried to throw another one, his wrist was seized by Jake. I did all of this for you. Sinjin didn't believe a word of his nonsense. Sinjin twisted back and slammed Jake hard against the wall. To be with Jake, he had already staked everything he had. Only now did he realize it had all been a scam. Only now did he realize it was layer upon layer of deception. How could he not be furious? Jake's fingertips rubbed along Sinjin's waist as he lowered his voice. Keep gambling. I won't let you regret it. The next second, he lifted his leg and kicked, forcing Sinjin straight down onto the bed with a dull thud. It's very dangerous at your place right now. I'll lock you up here first. Before the words even fell, Sinjin swung back and slapped him hard across the face. Jake licked the blood at the corner of his lips, his eyes growing darker as he raised his hand and took off his jacket. He grabbed a fistful of Sinjin's hair, roughly turned his face toward him, then lowered his head and kissed him. It didn't even count as a kiss. It was more like two wolves tearing at each other, grinding their teeth against each other. Two wolves tearing at each other. When Sinjin listened carefully, no matter what my true identity is, our relationship will never change. Yet in the very next second, Jake was shoved to the floor by Sinjin again. The first time I met you, you were a sex maniac. Back then, I even thought you were a gangster who'd gone completely insane. That's why I went along with you. Do you think I'm especially ridiculous? Now it's your turn to cooperate with me. After saying that, he forcibly shoved the thermos cup into Jake's mouth. Will Jake's deception cause Sinjin and Jake to part ways for good? But Jake has already fallen in love with Sinjin. What's worse, the enemy also knows Sinjin is his weak spot. Previously, we mentioned that Sinjin made Jake eat. Jake didn't refuse. Instead, he ate with particular effort. Sinjin rubbed the earring on his ear with the pad of his finger, only to discover it was fake. Dressed like this, you make it seem like someone else is eating my food. That fishy smell was even more like a reminder, as if someone else were eating my food. Sinjin rammed so hard that Jake's lips split open on the spot. Even with his lips split, Sinjin was still not satisfied. All this time pretending nothing's wrong, acting with me. Must be tiring, huh? Then enjoy it properly. This is the last time. Finish eating and get lost. Jake just wants Sinjin to calm down first, then think everything through clearly. Once you walk out, I won't be able to protect you. Sinjin bent down to pick up the umbrella that had fallen on the ground. He also made his position clear. Once he's outside, whatever he does will be his own decision. He doesn't need Jake meddling. Even when Sinjin stepped out the door, Jake was still kneeling on the ground, letting out a low, self-mocking laugh. He thought he had every part of Sinjin in the palm of his hand, but after tonight, he then realized that Sinjin wasn't what he had imagined. He was more normal than he had thought. It seemed he had judged him wrongly. Back home, Sinjin decided to throw away all of Jake's things. He splashed his face hard with cold water again. The experiences of his childhood had been tormenting him all along. It wasn't until he started down the path of car repair that he finally felt a bit better. But even that little bit of peace was shattered. Henri wanted Sinjin to sell drugs with him. Yet Sinjin no longer wanted to live that kind of life. He refused, and was brutally beaten up by the local gang leader. When he got back, he found Henri lying in a pool of blood. It was a good thing he had refused back then. Otherwise, the one lying on the ground now would have been Sinjen. Sinjen had always believed that the only way to end pain was to cut it off at the source. So, for the first time, a serious thought of leaving surfaced in his mind. And because of the botched operation, Jake was also forced to withdraw from this mission. Their superiors even told Jake to go and calm Benil down. Jake's body swayed for a moment. Was he really about to become a gangster? Now that he had Sinjen as a weakness, he could only obey. Sure enough, as soon as he returned to his place, he found that someone had been there. They had even left a photo of Sinjen on the table. He hadn't expected the other side to start applying pressure so quickly. After Sinjen left, Jake couldn't help himself and secretly went to look for him. He even snuck into Sinjen's room and pressed his face to the bedsheet to smell Sinjen's scent. Last time we mentioned that after going through so many things, Sinjen felt that leaving was the best choice. So he quit his job at the repair shop. Before leaving, Sinjen had one last meal together with everyone. When they heard that Sinjen was leaving, everyone was very reluctant to see him go. They said, if Sinjen needs help, he can contact them anytime. After running off to the countryside, Sinjen bought a second-hand car from a friend. The friend also reminded him that someone had been asking about his whereabouts and told Sinjen he must be careful. When he returned to his rented place, because the upstairs neighbor was too noisy, the one who ended up being complained about by the clueless neighbor next door was actually Sinjen. At this moment, Jake came to the house Sinjen was renting, planning to rent a room there as well. He inhaled the lingering scent of Sinjen on the bed, and he secretly watched Sinjen's every move every day. When Sinjen began to do certain things, Jake was listening next door, and his body reacted immediately. But the two of them could only use their own hands to press it down. Whenever that slow, unhurried walking sound started up, Sinjen couldn't help but think of Jake. But Sinjen only thought he hadn't fully sobered up yet, and simply didn't believe Jake would be able to find this place. At the same time, Rozu was preparing to make a move on Gulen. He wanted to force Sinjen out. At this moment, Sinjen also obtained Jake's detailed file from Hachong. Jake in uniform was outrageously handsome. He was also a member of a special organization that took part in top-secret missions from the inside. And to this day, no one had truly seen the real face of that organization. What was even more absurd was, how on earth did Hachong get hold of such highly classified data? Sinjen began to suspect that this information had been deliberately released by Jake. The more he thought about it, the more chaotic his mind became, and he just couldn't figure out Jake's true purpose. In the days that followed, Sinjen kept agonizing over everything related to Jake. He refused to believe that Jake would go this far for him. Yet the fact was, Jake really had done it for him. He had chased all the way here across 1,000 miles. Gulen was badly injured. In a moment of desperation, Sinjen called Jake for help. When Jake arrived, the first thing he saw was the deep mark on Sinjen's wrist. Jake stared at that mark, and his expression instantly darkened to an icy cold. Sinjen couldn't be bothered to explain his own injury and blurted out anxiously. 3 bullets grazed past his heart. He begged Jake to immediately contact a hospital he knew and save Gulen as fast as possible. But Jake only shook his head. Gulen had been taking drugs for a long time and had also lost so much blood. With an injury like that, there was no way he could hold on, and of course Sinjen understood. But Gulen was his only younger brother. His eyes turned red, and he was almost pleading. Is there really no way at all? Jake didn't give him time to break down and reached out to haul him up. There's no time. We have to destroy this place right now. If you don't want your brother to have died for nothing, pull yourself together. With that, Jake picked up the unconscious Gulen and headed straight for the car. Right after, he pulled out his gun and fired a burst at the gasoline barrels. Flames whooshed up, and in the glow of the fire, they sped away in their car. Standing in front of Gulen's tombstone, Sinjen couldn't hold back his guilt. If he hadn't hesitated back then and had just called anyone else, would Gulen have been saved? Jake, however, spoke up coldly. The cops around here had long since been bought off by Rozu. Calling the police is suicide. Sinjen was so furious his eyes were bloodshot. Now that he's dead, you must finally be relieved, right? To his surprise, Jake fell silent for a while and then actually started talking about himself. Since I was a kid, I felt like my parents didn't love me. But when I grew up and looked in the mirror, I saw I looked exactly like them. Even if one day I died out there somewhere, they still wouldn't come looking for me. They wouldn't even feel sad for me. After all, the life they live is pretty much the same as mine. Sinjen still didn't dare to fully trust Jake, but he still lowered his voice and said, "Thanks." Jake rarely softened his tone. "Instead of thanking me, you should thank yourself. It's a real blessing you didn't shoot Rozu. If he had died, it would have been a huge pain for me to clean up the mess." After saying that, He pulled a small oak carving from his pocket and handed it to Sinjen. It was something Gulen had carved for Sinjen when he was still alive. Just like you and your brother, even without blood ties, two people can still become family, Jake said in a low voice. The two people's hands inched closer, bit by bit. In the end, they clasped each other tightly. After that series of upheavals, the distance between Sinjen and Jake grew smaller. Jake laid all his trust on the table and even took the initiative to explain everything clearly. Because of that impulsive move at the junkyard, he'd been kicked off his original assignment. And while Sinjen scolded him for being too reckless, in his heart he understood. If Jake hadn't taken that risk back then, the two of them would have lost their lives there long ago. Jake told Sinjen not to keep avoiding him and to just wait for his return with an easy mind. At that moment, Sinjen received a call telling him to come reclaim his younger brother Gulen's belongings. There wasn't much. Aside from a few old clothes, there were only 4 hand-carved angel figurines left. The teacher said that at first Gulen's hands shook so badly that even holding the carving knife took tremendous effort. Slowly, he was also able to carve angels that looked quite decent. He would always mutter that he wanted to give the one he was most satisfied with to his older brother. You could tell that Gulen really cared about Sinjen. When he went back to the car alone, Sinjen could no longer hold back his emotions. Back then, when he hardened his heart and left Gulen, he thought it would make things a bit easier for himself. But the uneasiness in his heart only grew heavier. In fact, he had never thought of his younger brother as a burden. It was precisely because he worried too much that he chose to run away. When they were little, Gulen had always been in poor health, which made him worry far too much. Yet he had never felt that taking care of his younger brother was a burden. For Sinjen, protecting this one and only family member was the very meaning of his life. All he wished was for Gulen to be safe and sound, and truly happy. Sinjen wiped the little angel ornament Gulen had left behind while crying so hard his whole body trembled. Over and over again, he could only blame himself for failing to fulfill his responsibility as an older brother. Fortunately, he still had Jake by his side, and Jake treated Sinjen as a part of himself. After going through deception, quarrels, and all that, Sinjen slowly got used to having Jake around. The trust between the two of them also grew ever deeper through each round of friction and adjustment. I'm telling you, how do you two even manage to make target practice feel ambiguous and flirty? After retrieving Gulen's belongings, Sinjen asked Jake to meet him at a bar. As soon as they met, Jake pushed the door open, came in, and directly pulled the glass of alcohol from his hand. He raised an eyebrow and pressed him. You couldn't say it over the phone? You had to come all the way to the bar. The boss behind the bar sized up Jake and casually asked Sinjen, "Who's this?" Sinjen's tone was very light. An ordinary customer. Jake pushed the glass back onto the table. He half smiled. Just a customer? Sinjen rolled his glass, his gaze growing colder bit by bit. After I got Gulen's belongings, I finally understood people dragged into this matter are dying one after another. I want revenge on Rozu. Let me join the operation plan. Jake's fingers unconsciously stroked the rim of the glass, his voice sinking a little. I told you to wait here. Sinjen pinned down his restless hand. You don't actually think one night in bed can wipe out all suspicion. The one who should be waiting isn't me. It's you. If you want my trust, then let me into the plan. As long as you can do that, even if you want to have me shot, I won't complain. I'll definitely cooperate. The two of them clinked glasses and drained them in one go. Jake tapped the table lightly with his fingertip. Then we'll start with the most basic shooting. In the shooting range, the bullets were loaded. Jake signaled for Sinjen to try first and let him check his stance. Sinjen fired 2 shots in a row, and the bullet holes were still a bit off. Jake stepped forward and took off his noise-canceling earmuffs, his warm breath brushing past the rim of his ear. Relax first. Jake wrapped his hand around the one holding the gun. Don't use too much force. The key is support. Keep your hand steady. Jake spoke against his ear. Aim at the bullseye, then pull the trigger. Sinjen turned his head to look and found that Jake himself wasn't wearing earmuffs, so he couldn't help asking, "Aren't you going to wear them?" Jake shrugged. "I'm used to it." Sinjen couldn't say why, but he kept feeling that from the moment Jake walked in. He'd been deliberately flirting with him. His breathing surged up in waves. The longing and desire he'd kept pressed down for days completely broke loose. After they returned from the cemetery to the place they were staying, Jake had just taken off his coat when Sinjen suddenly spoke. "Hand over the gun. I'll take off your clothes." The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted it, because that wasn't what he'd meant to say at all. But his body had already moved first. In the instant their eyes met, all the pent-up emotion exploded. The heated kiss left Sinjen unable to think. All he wanted was to sink into this moment. The room was soon in a complete mess. Jake was as forceful as ever, and with one shove, The things on the table clattered to the floor. Just as they reached the critical moment, a sudden, rapid knocking sounded at the door. The neighbor next door had heard the commotion and come over. Sinjen said to ignore him, but Jake knew what that neighbor's temper was like. If you really ignored him, he could make noise all night. Sinjen straightened his clothes and went to open the door. The neighbor was full of aggression and immediately said he was going to call the police. It wasn't until he saw the badge on Jake's chest that the neighbor's face instantly went deathly pale. "Officer, this man is making trouble at home. Hurry up and arrest him." "Making trouble?" Jake leaned against the doorframe, raising an eyebrow, his fingertips slowly rubbing the badge as he let out a cold laugh. "I think he seems quite well behaved. It's you who's getting so worked up. Do you have something shameful hidden in your own room?" The neighbor shrank his neck in fright and slunk away. As soon as May came to the door, Sinjen immediately pressed him. Where did the police badge come from? Thinking back on what had just happened, the more he thought about it, the more wrong it felt. When the neighbor knocked, he hadn't even asked who it was. Then, thinking of the strange noises that had been coming from upstairs now and then lately, he suddenly caught on. "You live in the apartment above me and still monitor me?" Jake didn't even deny it. "How exactly did you pull it off? And how much have you seen?" Jake stared into his eyes, his tone very flat. "Even your little self-comforting sessions, I know all about them." Sinjen exploded on the spot. "Enough. I really can't take you anymore." Jake grabbed his hand, pressing his fingers to Sinjen's armpit and deliberately rubbing back and forth. The two of them tugged at each other like they were in a fight. Sinjen worried the neighbor next door would come back and cause trouble again, but Jake said, "I'll be right here. Let him come." Sinjen snapped back, annoyed. "You imposter. Don't slap on a police badge and start thinking you're a real cop. Okay?" Jake leaned in with a wicked grin. "But it works great, doesn't it? The moment you saw it, didn't you get even more excited?" After the shooting practice ended, Sinjen suddenly said he wanted to look at the personal files Jake had collected. They went back to the room in silence, and Jake pulled a manila envelope from the very bottom of his suitcase. Tucked amid the yellowing documents was a photo of Sinjen, staring right out at him. "What made you suddenly want to check your own file?" Jake leaned against the edge of the table and lit a cigarette. Sinjen pretended not to care and casually patted him on the shoulder. "It's not like you're some kind of mafia. I'm just a car mechanic. What about me is worth all this trouble for you?" Before he finished speaking, his gaze was suddenly nailed to a certain name. Osutin. This name was like a rusted nail, suddenly stabbing into the deepest part of his memory. Jake exhaled a puff of smoke and asked softly through the swirling haze, "Don't you want revenge? The one who drove you out onto the street?" Sinjen only let out a cold laugh. "People like that aren't worth wasting time on." He lowered his eyes, staring at the two letters Henri in the file, and suddenly the stench of blood from that day rushed back to his nose. The stench of blood from that day suddenly rushed back to his nose. He had clearly watched with his own eyes as Henri was about to die, yet he had forced himself to act like he didn't know. He thought that as long as he kept his mouth shut, no one would ever know. As for whether he would regret it, he'd leave that for later. He only wanted to bury all of it, never letting anyone find out. Even you couldn't possibly uncover the whole truth. Looks like you've got a past you won't even tell yourself. Could it be you're hiding a child somewhere? The words left even Sinjen choked. He pressed hard to smooth out the slightly crumpled documents. His voice carried a weariness that was almost like begging. "Stop looking into it." Jake watched the tight line of his jaw and suddenly realized whatever he was hiding, there was no way to get the answer out of his mouth. Even if they really did uncover it later, they would have to act like they didn't know. Maybe that would be better for both of them. Maybe this way is better for both of us. Sinjen flung the file back onto the table and turned to leave, but was nailed in place by Jake's words. "Kaisaru as well." He spun around abruptly, his pupils tightening violently in the shadows. "All of you are agents." Jake crushed out his cigarette, shaking his head as the ember flickered. "Only Kaisaru is. The repair shop is real, but for the hidden line of the drug trade, someone had to infiltrate." Sinjen closed the distance to Jake in 3 strides, grabbing his collar with such force the fabric was almost torn apart. "So all of this was a lie?" Jake met his scorching gaze head-on without flinching. "More brutal than you think. Very soon, you'll meet them." The expression Sinjen had been holding back until it burned was finally ignited, provoking Jake into kissing him again and again, unable to stop. The next morning, Jake took Sinjen to a pizza place and introduced him to his superior, Ralpyu. The woman's face was as cold as a blade as she shoved a stack of files straight onto the table. Her tone was harsh, leaving almost no room for argument. "This is your last chance to walk away, but once you step out that door, there's no turning back. Sinjin's gaze was hard as iron. I lost my way back a long time ago. I have to avenge my brother. Besides, he was already entangled with Rozu and could no longer return to the life he used to have. Sinjin lowered his eyes, staring at Jake's restless hand. He said in a low voice, "Whether it's the Mafia or secret agents, the danger is the same. For you and for me, it's all the same. I can never go back to living an ordinary life. In the end, I'll be the only one left. You won't be alone anymore. You still have Jake with you." After saying just a few brief words, Ralpyu swiftly put away the files and turned to leave. When the two of them stepped outside, Jake spoke up. "He may not trust me, but I trust him." "Of course he doesn't trust me, but I trust him," Ralpyu sneered. "If he actually trusted you, that would mean he'd really gone crazy." On the way back, Jake suddenly broke the silence. "Are you sure you won't regret it? If you're only doing this out of guilt, and that's the only reason you want revenge, then maybe you should think it over again." Sinjin stared at him, eyes burning. "Yes, I'm doing this for Gulen, but if this operation is destined to begin, I want to stand beside you simply because I choose to. If you're thinking of shutting me out, you'd better kill that idea right now." Jake gave his fingers a light shake. "As expected, you never stop surprising me. You're the most interesting person I've ever met." His gaze suddenly burned even hotter. "But from the sound of it, it's more like you're the one worried about me. The one who's really reckless isn't me, it's you, isn't it?" Sinjin was yanked forcefully into his arms. The searing kiss crashed down like a rainstorm. "You're right. Two people are always better than one." Sinjin grabbed Jake's ear. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Jake kept talking business with his mouth, but his hands were anything but honest, wandering all over the place. "Gotta get a car to modify. Other than you, I don't trust anyone. Call Kaisaru and let's get started right away." The two of them were so close, so intimate it was almost impossible to tell who was breathing. Seeing the tips of Jake's ears turning red, Sinjin grew even more confused. Why does this guy always like kissing me? Before getting out of the car, Jake rarely showed a serious expression. Only now do I really feel like I have a partner. After the car door closed, Sinjin still sat dazed in the driver's seat, but the corners of his mouth lifted on their own. He complained irritably, "Do whatever you want. Who besides me would partner with someone like you? A married couple wearing uniforms together. This image is just too striking." The car Sinjin previously sold at the junkyard, he has now bought back, and he drives it straight to the repair shop. He modifies it together with his old friends. As soon as everyone sees him return, their eyes light up. The repair shop owner even wants to keep him on, to have him continue working there. But Rozu is plotting something else. He wants to grab Sinjin and force him to eat properly. He wants to make Sinjin unable to leave him, but Sinjin isn't that easy to control. Want to capture Sinjin? It's not that simple. Rozu has even thought, if I can't have him, then I might as well destroy him. Meanwhile, Jake and Sinjin put on their uniforms and drive out to stop Counselor Konio's car. Sinjin gets out and asks the driver to show his license and registration, using speeding as the excuse. At that moment, Jake takes advantage of the chaos to quietly plant a bug inside the car. After finishing, Sinjin suddenly pretended to notice that the person in the back seat looked very familiar. He stared for 2 seconds. It turned out to be Congressman Konio. He immediately changed his tone and apologized, forcing a smile as he sent the man off, and waited for the congressman's car to drive far away. As soon as the car left, Sinjin immediately lashed out at Jake. "Suddenly calling someone over to act with you, this is the combat strategy you were talking about?" Jake wasn't having it either. "I thought you were doing a pretty convincing job just now," Sinjin said coldly. "If they see through that it's fake, we're done for. Can you take this a bit more seriously? From now on, we'll just follow this pattern. And you say I trust myself too much?" Jake shot back. "If I don't trust you, who else can I trust?" Sinjin was stumped on the spot. Right after that, Jake told Ijumil to keep a close watch on the surveillance. "As soon as you hear any news related to Rozu, report it immediately." Watching Jake methodically give out instructions, Sinjin suddenly felt he really did have the presence of an uncle. Ever since learning Jake Agent's true identity, the way he saw Jake had become completely different. At this moment, Sinjin recalled that morning when Jake helped straighten his clothes, and he had asked Jake then whether his personal information had long since been thoroughly investigated by the agents. "Only when everyone knows you're my person can I protect you more securely." Ijumil explained that Jake usually doesn't talk much, and does things entirely based on his mood. He just does whatever comes to mind, but you'll soon find yourself being led along by him. Sinjin's heart tightened. If I really get used to this, isn't that even worse? Wouldn't that mean I've been tamed by him? Just as he was thinking that, Jake suddenly spoke. "Let's go to the repair shop." Sinjin found it utterly absurd. We're going to the repair shop in uniform? What if our co-workers are still working overtime? Jake said he had already asked Kaisaru. No one was there now, and he wanted to go see how the car modifications were coming along. Sinjin complained outright. You were the one who said to just modify it, however, and now you're going back on your word. Then he casually teased him. You don't have some ulterior motive, do you? With the mood already like this, if in the next chapter you two still don't do anything, you're letting this uniform go to waste. There's just nothing more to say. When they arrived at the repair shop, the two of them started talking about the modifications, and Sinjin said he would have the car windows made bulletproof. Right after that, Jake said that no matter how sturdy the added glass is, it still wouldn't hold up under concentrated gunfire. But basic protection wouldn't be a problem, he just wasn't sure how long it could last. Sinjin said ordinary firepower definitely wouldn't be an issue, and he would also crank up the engine power so it wouldn't lose to a race car. Jake hadn't expected Sinjin to modify his own car. His heart suddenly gave a jolt, and he felt a kind of indescribable familiarity. Sinjin's tone was very steady. I'm confident I can modify this car to be better than any other. Before he finished speaking, Jake suddenly pressed up against him from behind, his breath brushing past Sinjin's ear as he teased in a low voice. His breath puffed against Sinjin's ear as he joked. You actually look the part in that outfit. You look more like an old cop than I do. Sinjin kicked him irritably. What's wrong with you? Jake didn't back off. Instead, he moved closer, wrapping both arms around Sinjin's waist and teasing with a smile. Stop being a mechanic. Go be a cook instead. Who knows? Maybe you're more suited to that line of work. No wonder I felt something was off back then. From the very beginning, this was your plan, wasn't it? Jake's hand slid up along his waistline, his voice laced with laughter. Weren't you the one who said you wanted to do something, and that's why you came along? Sinjin turned his head aside with a cold laugh. You just have to butt heads with me. Jake's hand was still slowly exploring his body. Don't you think that since we have to put on an act anyway, we might as well have some fun with it? Sinjin dodged his hand. I already said, I still don't trust you right now. Yeah, your brain and your body don't seem to be on the same channel. You say you don't trust me, but your actions say the opposite. And the way you look at me already says everything. You're this worked up. There's no way you're not feeling it. Sinjin suddenly flung his hand away. Enough, stop rubbing up against me. But Jake caught him in return and pressed his hand directly against his own chest. You're still going to be stubborn now? You've already put the uniform on, and you still want to keep preaching that righteous nonsense. He stepped forward, forcing Sinjin back against the car. Why not be honest? As expected, when Jake was helping Shenzhen put on the uniform, he was already plotting in his mind how to strip that uniform off, Last time, we mentioned that Jake told Shenzhen to be honest and stop being so stubborn. Shenzhen yanked him hard and berated him angrily. Shut up. Stop pretending you understand anything. Back then, who was it that forced you into not daring to trust anyone ever again? Jake admitted frankly, it was me who didn't get to know you well enough. But Shenzhen sneered inwardly. He hadn't apologized even once, and the wounds left by those betrayals. In his eyes, they probably didn't count for anything at all. And you were just a pawn in his plan. Yet Jake suddenly lowered his head to admit he was wrong, and that instead only stoked Shenzhen's anger even further. You wait until a moment like this to finally own up. Do you not regret it at all? I never regret anything I've done. Jake's tone didn't waver in the slightest. Carrying out missions, killing, including all those things you're thinking about. This is the kind of person I am, and you have to accept it. That was the first time Shenzhen saw Jake's gaze become that resolute. Unlike any madman he had ever seen, it didn't even look like a gaze a human should have. Rage and impulse exploded together. Shenzhen suddenly twisted his arm and slammed him against the car body. The baton was jammed hard against his lower back. Lunatics only know regret when their life is being strangled. But Jake just burst out laughing. At least I won't let you regret choosing me. Seizing the motion, he stood up and directly wrapped his arms around Shenzhen. Believe me, stay by my side. Shenzhen only felt he was utterly shameless. His real nature was like a hiding rat, with only a tiny bit of its tail sticking out. Whether I believe you or not is my freedom. Yet now you still dare to ask me to trust you. Jake suddenly gripped Fukami's hand. After this operation is over, we'll be even closer than we are now. He dropped to one knee and, like in prayer, kissed it devoutly. The water that was squeezed out turned out to be sweet. Seeing Jake working so desperately hard, Fukami's heart grew even more tangled. Can you really trust someone like this? If he keeps getting entangled with this lunatic, Will he really become a better person? Yakai shoved Jake away, his voice as cold as a knife. If you don't want to be punished, then do your job properly. In order to make his wife happy, of course Jake worked himself to the bone. The rod suddenly slid in all the way, and Fukami was both furious and flustered, his breathing in complete disarray. He opened his mouth to curse him for being too reckless, only for Ijumil's voice to come through the earpiece at that very moment. Ijumil reported the surveillance results on Counselor Konyo's vehicle and mentioned that secret conversation inside the car. Hold on a second. The report was still going on, and Jake's hands hadn't stopped working either. Rozu was going to host a charity gala, clearly intending to pull together big shots from all circles and political figures. Counselor Konyo was still hesitating about whether to attend. Deputy Director Ralpyu had been right. Rozu's intention to use the charity event to climb up to new centers of power could no longer be hidden at all. Not hearing a response from Jake, Ijumil immediately pressed him. Are you listening? Jake only hoped he would send the recording over to Ralpyu, but Ijumil kept asking them why, and even questioned why they hadn't taken the truck back and had even turned off their locator. Jake only tossed out one line, "We've still got something to take care of," and then hung up. Shinjian sneered that he managed to mix business with pleasure. TSK, this is just your usual style, isn't it? Jake's hands didn't stop moving, but there was a smile at the corner of his mouth. This is actually my first time in a situation like this. He paused, but giving it a try kind of feels pretty good. Shinjian called him a lunatic and told him to go outside if he wanted to talk. Yet Jake didn't go out at all. Instead, he pulled Shinjian into the car, planning to work and chat in the car at the same time. These two really are something. Every time they go on a mission, it's like they're in a fight, but the sugar they sprinkle around somehow ends up sickeningly sweet. Who would have thought that the always overbearing Jake would actually act spoiled? And as for our mission spoiling her superior, she really doesn't know where to draw the line. Sinjen had heard long ago about batons that could spray liquid, but this was his first time running into it himself, and he never imagined it would feel like this. Of course, it was also Jake's first time seeing a scene like this. He was quite curious, muttering that he wanted to see it again. The way he looked didn't match his usual decisive, hard-charging personality at all. He was more like a large dog that's just discovered a new toy, his anticipation written all over his eyes. How could Sinjen withstand him acting spoiled like that? Naturally, he had to indulge him, but this kind of phenomenon is rare to begin with, so they could only try a few more times and hope to get lucky. In the pauses between swings of the baton, Jake would cling over to act spoiled again, and the contrast was absurdly strong. Yet it was impossible to turn him down. People say men who know how to act spoiled have the best luck in life, and when it comes to Jake, that saying fits almost too well. When he started acting spoiled, Sinjen cursed him as a lunatic. But in action, he still fulfilled all of his requests. Mist once again billowed up. The shivering surged up once again, a faint yet distinct tremor spreading out through every limb and bone, carrying the force of swinging a stick and a touch of pleasure, mixed with the warm breath of the person beside him. Sinjen had originally wanted to open his eyes and clearly see the expression on Jake's face at that moment, but that sudden, all-encompassing warmth instantly wrapped around his entire body. In a daze, he actually thought he was still in the car. The heavy drowsiness surged over him like a tide, making him relax uncontrollably.